Chapter 11:11. Then, the Central Prefecture's king said coldly, "It's a pity that you are not my old self. It's too early for you to kill my master. Get lost." With a shake of his body, the majestic mortal fairy's strength rushed out in all directions. However, when it entered Qin Xian'er's body, it passed through her body directly as if it was hitting the air. Qin Xian'er was not hurt at all. Even Su Yu couldn't understand Qin Xian'er now. She could hug him from behind quietly and could even deal with the mortal fairy's strength easily. Qin Xian'er's hand left the dagger and said indifferently, "After all, you have experienced the divine tribulation. As expected, the death dagger can't kill you." The dagger in the waist of the Central Prefecture's king was turned into a mass of gray airflow and poured into his body. Wherever the airflow passed through, the flesh and blood of the body would be killed immediately. If the airflow which contained the death qi flowed through the body, even the flesh and soul of the mortal fairy would be killed. However, the divine fire in the body of the Central Prefecture's king was the nemesis of the death qi, which resisted the airflow and burned it into ashes slowly. Damn Death Phoenix constitution! If I had known this, I wouldn't have guided you to activate the power of your bloodline. Although Qin Xian'er was right in front of him, the Central Prefecture's king didn't have time to kill her, because he wanted to concentrate all the divine fire in his body to extinguish the death qi that had invaded his body. Qin Xian'er didn't say anything. Then, she inserted a pitch-black death dagger into the waist of the Central Prefecture's king indifferently. The Central Prefecture's king gritted his teeth angrily and said in a low voice, "Did you plan to kill me from the very beginning? Was your hatred for Su Yu just a disguise?" Qin Xian'er withdrew her hand. She didn't know whether it was an illusion or not, but her palm became transparent for a moment as if it had suddenly disappeared. Qin Xian'er nodded her head lightly and said, "Yes. Only by gaining your trust can I attack you at a close distance and have a chance to solve the mortal tribulation of Brother Su Yu. Therefore, when you found me, I became your apprentice smoothly." The Central Prefecture's king was indescribably angry. He thought he had everything under control. However, he didn't expect that he would be tricked by this little girl. The hatred in her heart was so real that he couldn't help but doubt it. "The only thing you miscalculated is that you can't kill me," the Central Prefecture's king sneered. Qin Xian'er revealed a pitiful expression and shook her head lightly. "No, someone can kill you." "Who?" the Central Prefecture's king sneered. "Celestial destroying arrow." Qin Xian'er looked at the golden arrow in Su Yu's hand. The Central Prefecture's king couldn't help but laugh out loud. Unless a peak mortal fairy is holding this arrow, the celestial destroying arrow can't be used at all. "Let me ask you, in this world, apart from me, is there a second peak mortal fairy?" Qin Xian'er replied, "Indeed, there isn't. However, I can create one." "Made." The Central Prefecture's king sneered disdainfully. When Qin Xian'er held a lump of heart which emitted a cold aura in her hand, his face stiffened. Then, he became so furious that his whole body trembled with anger. What did you do to Hanxian?" "Nothing, I just did what you wanted to do," Qin Xian'er said calmly. "You guided her to cultivate the Jade Maiden's heavenly frost art to the top level. Then, you took away her divine bloodline." The Central Prefecture's king's pupils contracted. Because of anger and shock, his face was distorted like a greedy rich man whose treasures were stolen. "How do you know she has the divine bloodline?" "Her bloodline is very special. She shouldn't emit the aura of a descendant of a deity." "Very special?" "Well, she is special indeed. The sleeping bloodline of the cultivation deity is as useful as elixirs for you to reach the level of a deity," Qin Xian'er said. The Central Prefecture's king's expression changed dramatically again. "Then," he said gloomily, "who told you that?" "The person who knew this is already dead." Qin Xian'er pointed at her ears. "As the Death Phoenix body, you can hear the voices of all the dead souls in this world. Even if the living don't say anything, the dead will." The dead souls you killed just know it. She activated the Death Phoenix body and found out Han Xuan's secret by accident. Han Xian had the bloodline of a deity that even she didn't know about. It was the rare cultivation deity bloodline. The cultivation deity was also a kind of deity. By cultivating to the level of a deity, one's cultivation speed would be unparalleled by others. This kind of deity could improve very fast. As a descendant of a deity, once the cultivation deity bloodline was awakened, her cultivation speed would also be very fast. However, for some reason, the cultivation deity bloodline in Han Xian was sleeping. The sleeping bloodline was not awakened, so it was ownerless. Therefore, if an outsider obtained it and activated it, it would become the outsider's possession. Anyone who obtained such a special bloodline would obtain the benefit of the cultivation deity bloodline in a short period of time, a sharp increase in cultivation. Although it was only a temporary sharp increase, it was very significant for a peak mortal fairy like the Central Prefecture's king, who was about to reach the level of a deity. At least, it would increase his chances of reaching the level of a deity. If an outsider wanted to take out the sleeping bloodline, it would be difficult to use external force. Otherwise, it would disturb the bloodline and activate it, which would benefit Han Xian. However, the Jade Maiden Heavenly Frost art was a vicious method that was specially created to seize the bloodline. If a person with the sleeping bloodline cultivated it to the top without knowing it, the cultivation deity bloodline in his body would be frozen, and then it would be taken away easily. The ice heart-shaped object in Qin Xianer's palm was the cultivation deity bloodline that was taken out from Han Xuan's body. Are you going to swallow it yourself? The Central Prefecture's king's face was gloomy. His eyes were bloodshot, which was a sign that he was going to be demonized. Qin Xianer shook her head. No. What? The Central Prefecture's king was a bit surprised. Qin Xianer had made great efforts to become his disciple. Now, she finally seized the cultivation deity bloodline. She didn't want to give it to him? Qin Xianer threw herself into Su Yu's arms like a baby swallow. She put her small palm on Su Yu's chest with distress on her face. The gray airflow in Su Yu's body was absorbed bit by bit. Brother Su Yu, I'm sorry. I didn't discuss it with you in advance to gain the Central Prefecture's king's trust. Qin Xianer said anxiously like a child who had made a mistake. Su Yu smiled and touched her head. Then, he said with a sigh, Silly girl, how could I not know that you did it on purpose? Qin Xianer was stunned a bit. Then, she said in surprise, you knew I pretended to betray you? If you really wanted to kill me, you could have hugged me from behind. You could have killed me thousands of times. Why did you bother to poison me? Su Yu said with a smile. Qin Xianer hugged Su Yu from behind silently. Then, she stabbed the death dagger into his waist easily. The Central Prefecture's king could resist the death dagger, but Su Yu couldn't. Therefore, when he found out Qin Xianer poisoned him with the death dagger, he knew Qin Xianer must have an ulterior motive. Therefore, he cooperated with Qin Xianer to deceive the Central Prefecture's king. It turns out I was seen through by you, brother Su Yu. Qin Xianer's face turned red. Then, she said angrily, then, why did you say those words? Humph. What words? He was willing to die in the hands of Qin Xianer. When I heard your words, I almost cried. I was afraid you would believe me. How could I kill you, brother Su Yu? Qin Xianer's big eyes were filled with tears of grievance. She was also scared by this dangerous move. Su Yu held her in his arms gently. My dear Qin Xianer, you can deceive me, but I can't deceive you, right? Qin Xianer said coquettishly with a red face. I don't care. Anyway, I was scared. Ha ha ha. Su Yu couldn't help but laugh. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. When did Qin Xianer learn to act coquettishly? You can punish me later. Now, let's deal with the situation in front of us first. Su Yu said seriously. Even if he was trapped, he couldn't hurt the Central Prefecture's king unless he had the celestial destroying arrow in his hand. Don't worry. If I give you the bloodline of the cultivation deity, even if you can't become a deity, you can reach the peak mortal fairy realm temporarily. Qin Xianer handed the ice heart to Su Yu carefully. Lord Shen Yichen gave you the celestial destroying arrow because he hoped you could take revenge. Brother Su Yu, please don't refuse. Looking at Qin Xianer in front of him, Su Yu loved her even more. Every time they parted, Qin Xianer would prepare a lot of things for him secretly. She didn't want to use them, so she hid them little by little and gave them to Su Yu when they met again. There was no exception. This time, she had planned for half a year and seized the bloodline of the cultivation deity. She had been waiting for this day to come. Taking over the heart, Su Yu said, "How did you know I had the celestial destroying arrow? Besides, Gang Dalei appeared in the Five Elements Mountain because of your guidance, right? Could it be that you knew my every move? With the Death Phoenix body, it shouldn't be difficult for her to control a skeleton. That was why Gang Dalei's skeleton could move even though his body and soul had been destroyed." Qin Xianer nodded her head and said with bright eyes, "Sister Jingyu predicted this. She inherited the Path Divine Decree of Senior Tianjizi. Half a year ago, she predicted this situation and planned it in advance. I became the disciple of the Central Prefecture's king and took the opportunity to kill him. If I couldn't, I would take the bloodline of the cultivation deity. Sister Jingyu taught me this. She planned it half a year ago?" Su Yu couldn't help but be surprised. Xia Jingyu had practiced the Path Divine Decree to such an extent that she knew what would happen half a year later. Therefore, she could guide Su Yu to this place in advance and seize the bloodline. Suddenly, Su Yu remembered Yun Yazi had said that the reason he could resolve the crisis of the human ordeal was related to the word phoenix. Qin Xianer and Xia Jingyu didn't have the word phoenix in their names. However, Qin Xianer had the Death Phoenix body, and there was a phoenix mark on the back of her neck. Now, Qin Xianer was the hope of resolving the human ordeal. Since half a year ago, the two women had been planning for Su Yu. They only cherished him. What more could he ask for in this life with these two women? "How can I refine the bloodline?" Su Yu asked. If he used the Divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron, the effect would be reduced and the process would be very slow. Qin Xianer said, "Swallow it directly. The Jade Maiden Heavenly Frost art is a special method to seize the sleeping bloodline of the divine descendants. It has restrained the power of the divine blood. As long as you are in the fairy realm, you won't be harmed by it." Chapter 11-12. Su Yu glanced at the Central Prefecture's king coldly. Under the Central Prefecture's furious gaze, Su Yu opened his mouth and swallowed the whole heart. "Hey!" And the Central Prefecture's king was furious. The bloodline of the cultivation deity that he had cultivated for more than 10 years had been taken away by Su Yu. However, the Central Prefecture's king had to shut his mouth immediately. As soon as he was distracted, the two death daggers rushed into his body quickly. He had to concentrate on suppressing the death daggers. Su Yu also closed his eyes slowly to digest the bloodline of the cultivation deity. Time passed little by little. Both the Central Prefecture's king and Su Yu were racing against time. One was dissolving the death airflow in his body, and the other was refining the bloodline of the cultivation deity. The one who got the first opportunity would win. Qin Xianer was getting nervous. Xia Jingyu could only predict the situation that led Su Yu here. After that, she couldn't see the future because of the existence of the 39 ordeals. She couldn't predict whether Su Yu would be dead or alive. They chose to fight with the Central Prefecture's king in this risky way. The result was unpredictable. Half a day passed. The Central Prefecture's king stabilized the death airflow and was gradually forcing it out of his body. The bloodline of the cultivation deity in Su Yu's body also showed signs of merging with Su Yu. The two of them were equally matched. It was impossible to determine who would take the first opportunity. Qin Xianer leaned on Su Yu's side and pressed her small hands on her chest. She looked at Su Yu with firm eyes. Another half a day passed. The 9th day of the human tribulation, the last day. The Central Prefecture's king had forced out 30% of the death airflow. After forcing out another 30%, he could suppress the other 40% airflow with his cultivation. Su Yu had also refined 30% of the bloodline of the cultivation deity. The bloodline of the cultivation deity had started to work. His cultivation of the grade 9 fairy was growing crazily like weed. He had broken through the Almighty Realm and reached the grade 6 Almighty Realm. However, it was far from enough. If Su Yu was given another half a day, it would be enough. Finally, half a day passed. There was only half a day left before the outbreak of the human tribulation. The Central Prefecture's king could barely move. He had forced out nearly 60% of the death airflow in his body. He would be able to kill Su Yu soon before the bloodline of the cultivation deity was completely merged. As for Su Yu, his cultivation had just skyrocketed to the level of all creations. He was still a whole level away from the peak of the mortal fairy. Qin Xian'er clenched her teeth, held Su Yu's waist, and flew away. At the same time, she said to him through telepathy, "Brother Su Yu, you continue with the lotus, leave the rest to me. We still have a backup plan." An hour later, in front of Qin Xian'er's thatched cottage, she raised her palm and shattered the thatched hut. Beneath the thatched hut was a transportation formation that had been prepared a long time ago. Moreover, it was an extremely rare super-transportation formation that could allow one to travel across an entire province. Although Su Yu was cultivating, he was still aware of his surroundings, and he was shocked. How could the two of them set up a super-teleportation array? In order to set up this array, not only did it require a spatial array master who was proficient in spatial calculations, but it also required a huge amount of resources. At the very least, it required the resources of a prefecture's king to set up a super-teleportation array. Sister Jingyu and I discussed that if we fail, we can leave a way out. This teleportation array was set up by Sister Jingyu. She has read all the books on spatial arrays in the world, and after studying them for half a year, she has become a master of spatial arrays, Qin Xian'er said enviously. Her? Su Yu was relieved. As long as there was anything in this world that required comprehension, there was probably nothing that could stump her. But setting up a teleportation array requires a huge amount of resources, right? How did she get so many resources? Su Yu asked in surprise. Zhenlong City had almost lost its foothold. Where could she find so many resources? Qin Xian'er said, "Isn't it simple? Just dismantle the legacy of the divine-level transportation formation." Back then, we decided to settle down here after discovering the ruins. Later on, we discovered that the ruins were actually a barren god-tier teleportation array. After Big Sister Jingyu's efforts, we managed to restore part of its functions, allowing us to teleport back and forth multiple times. Big Sister Jingyu used the remaining materials to build this super-teleportation array. Su Yu was surprised. Who set up the divine-level transportation formation in the belly of the mountain and this place? What is the purpose of this teleportation array? Su Yu was quite confused when he thought of the skeleton of the ice frost dragon, which had been lying in the belly of the mountain for many years. "Brother Su Yu, let's go. The Central Prefecture's king should be here soon." Qin Xian'er led Su Yu out of the teleportation array and left this place. 1 hour later, the Central Prefecture's king arrived at this place slowly. Staring at the dim teleportation array, he was quite annoyed. The other teleportation array had been destroyed. Su Yu escaped again. And, "Traitor! I will make you beg for death." The Central Prefecture's king glanced at them coldly. Then, he turned around and looked at the Royal Beast Prefecture. This desolate prefecture had become a ghost town. Because of the sudden arrival of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, most of the families and sects didn't even have time to clear away their belongings. That was why many teleportation arrays could be preserved. Near the Holy Spirit Imperial Beast faction, A teleportation array hidden in an abandoned valley was lit up suddenly. Then, Qin Xianer walked out of it. She held Su Yu's waist with one hand and grabbed his arm with the other hand. Then, she helped Su Yu walk out of the teleportation array strenuously. "Brother Su Yu, don't worry. Just focus on refining it. I won't let you go unless I die." Qin Xianer wiped away the beads of sweat on her forehead as she helped Su Yu up the Holy Spirit Imperial Beast School. After the incident of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, the Holy Spirit Imperial Beast faction had become a dead place. No one would come here except for ghosts. Qin Xianer supported Su Yu with difficulty and rushed to the teleportation array in the faction. Then, she said happily, "As expected, it is still the same as half a year ago. It is not seriously damaged." Half a year ago, when the glittering jewel mortal fairy was ravaging the royal beast prefecture, she and Xia Jingyu came here at the most dangerous time and set up the teleportation array in the valley. Su Yu was speechless, but his heart was full of warmth. Because of their clever arrangement, it was very convenient for him to use the abandoned teleportation array in this place. No one would stop him. If it were in other prefectures, no one would dare to disobey the Central Prefecture's king and allow Su Yu to use the teleportation array. Qin Xianer put Su Yu down carefully. Then, she bent down to check the teleportation array. She said worriedly, "In theory, this super teleportation array can teleport us to any super teleportation array in the continent. However, because we are worried that the glittering jewel mortal fairy will use this teleportation array to reach their territory, most of the teleportation arrays on the other side have been closed. Now, there is only one place that we can go to, but we don't know where it leads to." After checking the teleportation array, Qin Xianer sat beside Su Yu. Then, she looked around nervously like a little white rabbit. All of a sudden, Su Yu felt a sense of unease in his heart, and he said distractedly, "He's almost here." Originally, the journey would only take 1 hour. However, it took the Central Prefecture's king 4 hours. His strength was really suppressed by Su Yu. Qin Xianer had prepared for this. She helped Su Yu up and put the crystals into the teleportation array. Then, they entered the teleportation array quickly. When the Central Prefecture's king arrived, they had already teleported away. However, as he stared at the teleportation array in the Holy Spirit Beast faction, the Central Prefecture's king said sarcastically, "Don't you know how the glittering jewel mortal fairy, who was besieged by the 5 prefectures' kings half a year ago, disappeared overnight?" Swish! He tore the void with one hand. His speed was dozens of times faster than before. His strength was recovering rapidly. Chi! With a dull sound, Qin Xianer and Su Yu appeared in a dark underground secret room. As soon as they got out of the room, they smelled a pungent smell. When they opened their eyes, they saw the corpses that had lost their hearts and souls were piled up like a mountain. Su Yu's heart sank when he saw this. This is the underground of the Central Prefecture's palace. Isn't this the place where the glittering jewel mortal fairy is hiding? These corpses were enough to explain the situation. Hearing this, Qin Xianer was also surprised. What? The Central Prefecture's palace? How could we be here? I was careless. Su Yu's face darkened slightly. Who else dared to open the teleportation array to accommodate the glittering jewel mortal fairy except the Central Prefecture's king? The only place where the teleportation array was opened must be the Central Prefecture's palace. Then let's run away quickly. This is the nest of the Central Prefecture's king. Who knows how many experts are left here? Qin Xianer was anxious. It didn't matter if she died, but she didn't want to implicate Su Yu. Su Yu waved his hand. It's too late. Let's try our best. If my guess is right, there should be a slim chance of survival. After saying that, Su Yu refined the cultivation deity's bloodline in his body immediately. Now he had refined 80% of it. His cultivation had skyrocketed to the mortal fairy realm temporarily. However, there was still a long way to go before he reached the peak. He still needed 5.5 hours. Only 5.5 hours were left before the ordeal of human broke out. Whether he could survive the ordeal of human or not depended on the last 5.5 hours. Maybe it sensed Su Yu's crisis. The divine nine-dragon cauldron also gushed out divine blood at this moment. With the help of the divine blood, Su Yu's refining speed was increased by 10%. Su Yu was delighted. In this way, he could save 10 minutes. Time passed bit by bit. 2 hours later, Su Yu refined 90% of the bloodline. His cultivation had surpassed the second stage of mortal fairy. He was still 2 stages away from the peak. Another 2 hours later, Su Yu refined 95% of the bloodline. His cultivation had reached the third stage of mortal fairy. Only 5% was left before he could completely integrate the cultivation deity's bloodline. However, it was too late. Although the divine nine-dragon cauldron kept pouring the divine blood, it still needed 10 minutes. Su Yu could feel the anxiety in his heart. The Central Prefecture's king was coming. Was he going to fail on the verge of success? He just needed to complete it. When Su Yu was feeling anxious, a lazy, strange laughter came from his mind. Hey boy, you are going to die soon. Should I scatter flowers or scatter flowers? Oh no, you are the most vicious guy. You won't let me out even if you die. In this way, won't I die with you? No. I can't die in such an unknown way. After saying that, Su Yu's eyes automatically showed reincarnation ripples. Strands of pure divine power flowed out of his eyes and merged into Su Yu's body. Suddenly, the speed of refining the cultivation deity's bloodline was more than 10 times faster. Is this the divine power of the evil god? Su Yu was secretly surprised. When did he recover so much that his divine power could penetrate the soul space? In other words, the soul space couldn't control this evil god at all. However, there was no time to think about it now. The Central Prefecture's king was coming. Chapter 11:13. This was because Su Yu could even hear the sound of his heart thumping wildly due to his uneasiness. The Central Prefecture's king was very close to this place. Clenching his teeth, Su Yu used the divine power of the evil god for one last gamble. His realm was skyrocketing, quickly reaching the critical point of the third stage of the mortal fairy realm, and he was rushing towards the last stage. Once he reached that level, he would be able to use the celestial vanquishing arrow. However, at this very moment, 2 figures suddenly appeared in the dark underground secret chamber. A man and a woman, whose whole bodies were shrouded in ghost energy, walked towards Su Yu with their hands clasped behind their back. When he revealed his face, Su Yu's pupils contracted. Tian Renyao, Tian Yu. It's you guys? Su Yu was extremely shocked. The 2 of them could actually appear without a sound, without any aura fluctuations. What kind of cultivation level were they at? Tian Renyao was extraordinarily handsome and had a faint smile on his face. Tian Yu, on the other hand, glared at Su Yu with slight displeasure. Brother Su, how have you been? Tian Renyao was still smiling. When we parted ways in the Heavenly Knife region, do you remember what I said? Of course he remembered. The next time they met, they would be enemies. Su Yu's heart sank. How could he have forgotten that the Central Prefecture was now occupied by the Ghost Clan? The Ghost Clan was the ally of the Central Prefecture's king. 100 years ago, they plotted against Shun Yichen together. 100 years later, he made a comeback and conspired to conquer the 9 prefectures. You didn't even inform me in advance before cultivating in my territory. Brother Su, are you looking down on me? Tian Renyao said with a faint smile, but a dangerous light gradually appeared in his eyes. Tian Yu's pretty face gradually turned cold, and her killing intent appeared frequently. If you want to touch Brother Su Yu, you must first get past me. Qin Xianer shouted softly as she stood in front of Su Yu. At the most critical moment, 2 powerful enemies had actually appeared. Their bodies exuded an aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. It wasn't all creations, it was an even more powerful force. Move aside. You're not their match. Su Yu sighed. If he was given half a cup of tea's time, he should be able to refine the last half of the cultivation deity's bloodline and improve his cultivation to the 4th stage of the mortal fairy. But now, it seemed that he had no choice but to stop. Because they are the ghost prison's great emperor, Su Yu said coldly. Tianyu was taken aback. Her eyes were filled with murderous intent. Tian Renyao, on the other hand, was calm and unruffled. He only revealed a surprised expression. So Brother Su already guessed it? Xian Er's eyes widened and she sucked in a breath of cold air. Ghost prison's great emperor? After coming to 9 regions for so long, how could she not know the name of the great emperor of Ghost Prison? Back then, he was second only to Shunichen. His martial prowess was unparalleled, and he unified the world of ghosts and souls. Ghost Prison's great emperor. Tian Renyao and Tian Yu smiled at the same time. The two of them gradually approached each other, and their bodies actually fused into one. The front was Tian Renyao and the back was Tian Yu. The two of them were twins. I'm very curious. How did you guess my true identity? Tian Renyao and Tian Yu spoke at the same time. Their voices were a mixture of male and female voices, and it was impossible to tell whether they were male or female. Su Yu hurried to refine it as he asked, "Is it that hard to guess? Even an outstanding person like Bai Lingtian follows your lead. The entire ghost army of 9 regions also listens to your orders. Who else could you be except the ghost prison's great emperor? Secondly, you are a man, but you like men. Tian Yu is a woman, but she likes women. Yin and Yang are mixed up, and there is no distinction between men and women. I happen to be well versed in many ancient books. I know that 100 years ago, the ghost prison's great emperor spoke in a male and a female voice, so I guessed it. Now that you can come in front of me without being noticed, your strength is profound and extraordinary. It's just to confirm the guess in my heart." Swoosh! The sound of space shattering suddenly resounded in the secret room. A figure in a royal robe, emitting a dazzling golden light, teleported out. "Aunt, I have to admit that you are very smart." The Central Prefecture's king had arrived. When Su Yu was only a hair's breadth away, he finally arrived. He still lost by a small margin. You can even guess his identity. I really don't know what else you don't know. The Central Prefecture's king seemed to be praising, but more like mocking. The more a dying person knows, the more ironic it is. Looking sideways at the ghost prison's great emperor, the Central Prefecture's king said, "Well done, otherwise, if he breaks through the realm of the mortal fairy, it will be troublesome." The ghost prison's great emperor didn't care. "If you die, it will do me no good." Staring at Su Yu, the ghost prison's great emperor smiled. "You might as well guess again. What am I going to do to you next?" With a flash of cold light, the ghost prison's great emperor teleported in front of Su Yu, and a palm containing the boundless power of the mortal fairy pressed towards Su Yu's head. The Central Prefecture's king frowned, but did not stop it. In the end, this man was going to die, and it didn't matter who killed him, as long as the divine 9-dragon cauldron was not exposed. However, he suddenly found that Su Yu not only did not resist, but a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "I guess you will help me." "Ha ha, that's right." The ghost prison's great emperor changed his murderous intent and laughed. The power of the mortal fairy in his palm suddenly turned into a group of divine power and entered Su Yu's body. "This is the blood of the emperor's descendants, enjoy it. He is also a descendant of the gods, a descendant of the gods." With the help of the blood of the ghost prison's great emperor, Su Yu's refining speed soared unprecedentedly, and his cultivation was like a flood opening the gate, rushing endlessly. The sudden scene, not only did Xianer not react, but even the Central Prefecture's king was stunned for a moment. When he recovered, the Central Prefecture's king teleported over and slapped Su Yu's head, while shouting, "Ghost Prison's great emperor! You are crazy!" Qin Xianer's betrayal, he could understand. But the betrayal of the ghost prison's great emperor, he could never understand. What good would it do for the ghost prison's great emperor to help Su Yu destroy him? No, it was only bad. As the ghost race that ravaged Jojo 100 years ago, after Su Yu killed the Central Prefecture's king, would he let go of the ghost prison's great emperor? In any case, he couldn't figure out the motives of the ghost prison's great emperor. Ha ha ha! The ghost prison's great emperor laughed and raised his hand. 8 yellow beads were arranged in front of his chest in order to form a ring. That is the underworld pearl, the famous magic weapon of the ghost prison's great emperor. The Central Prefecture's king slapped, and the 8 underworld pearls rotated like meteors. Under the high speed, not only did they remove the power of the Central Prefecture's king, but they also rubbed his palm with the momentum of high-speed rotation, revealing the bloody arm bones. This scene stunned Su Yu. Could the underworld pearl be used in this way? Brother Su, when I learned that you threw my famous magic weapon as a stone, do you know how I felt? The ghost prison's great emperor turned the underworld pearl and laughed. Su Yu blushed, rolled his eyes and ignored him. He seized the time to refine the blood of the cultivation deity. The Central Prefecture's king's arm shook, and the injury quickly recovered. His face was full of indignation. Ghost prison's great emperor! Do you really want to ruin my big plan? Big plan? Ha ha! Occupy the Jojo continent, refine it, and sell it to a god in exchange for a quasi-god's celestial energy sphere? The ghost prison's great emperor revealed his true intentions. To become the emperor of Jojo, the Central Prefecture's king had already done it. As early as 100 years ago, after the fall of Shinichen, he was invincible. So what if he became the emperor? He had a deeper purpose, to sell the Jojo continent. It sounded really unbelievable. A complete cavern world without the protection of the gods is indeed a piece of fat meat that everyone covets. The ghost prison's great emperor did not care about the increasingly pale face of the Central Prefecture's king. You are looking for death. The Central Prefecture's king's killing intent rose, and he shouted, "Get out of here!" He exerted all his strength and concentrated all the mortal fairy's power to punch out, trying to destroy the ghost prison's great emperor and Su Yu together. The ghost prison's great emperor's face suddenly became dignified, and he controlled the 8 underworld pearls to constantly remove the power that made him feel pressured. Fortunately, the Central Prefecture's king was injured and could not exert his full strength. In addition, the power of the underworld pearl is extraordinary, and it blocked this blow. Even so, the 8 underworld pearls have serious scratches on the body surface, causing the ghost prison's great emperor to sigh with regret, but also caused a surprise. 100 years ago, you hid the strength comparable to Shinichen. 100 years later, your strength has risen again. The Central Prefecture's king has no time to pay attention to the nonsense of the ghost prison's great emperor. If he doesn't get rid of Su Yu as soon as possible, he will be the one who will be killed. You're the one who forced me to do this. I didn't want to kill you because we worked together 100 years ago, but now, even if ghosts and gods come to question me, I'm not afraid. The Central Prefecture's king looked ferocious. He took a deep breath, and the demon god's power surged in his body. Finally, the ghost prison's great emperor's face changed, and he said in surprise, "The power of demon god, you are not a human?" Even though they had cooperated for 100 years, he didn't know that the Central Prefecture's king, a human, was not a human. No, it should be said that he was not a pure human. Be careful. He is the descendant of a human god and a demon god, and he is performing the human-demon transformation. Su Yu's mood was extremely grave. In terms of cultivation alone, the Central Prefecture's king was invincible in the world. With the help of the human-demon transformation, he was even more terrifying than the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Even if the 8 prefectures' kings gathered together, they would still be no match for him. Human-demon transformation? The knowledge of the ghost prison's great emperor is naturally not a trivial matter. How could he not know this famous trick? The descendant of a human god and a demon god has a unique skill that can be transformed between human and demon, thereby obtaining a higher level of power. Today's Central Prefecture's king is already at the peak of the mortal fairy. If he goes up another level, wouldn't he reach the realm of gods? Die. The Central Prefecture's king, who has transformed into 1,000 feet demon body, swallowed the demonic energy in his mouth, roared, and the mountain-like demon body slammed down. The ghost prison's great emperor gritted his teeth, unwilling to admit defeat, and his body instantly expanded 100 times, reaching a giant of 1,000 feet. The 8 underworld pearls also expanded, each becoming 100 feet in size, spinning rapidly to resist the palm of the Central Prefecture's king. This palm directly smashed the 8 underworld pearls, and the remaining power of the demonic palm slammed into the body of the ghost prison's great emperor. The ghost prison's great emperor gritted his teeth and spat out a mouthful of ghost energy. His palms turned into 10 feet of ghost claws and grabbed the remaining power of the attack. The two collided, and the ghost prison's great emperor retreated again and again. The huge body collapsed the underground chamber, and the ruins on the ground were also overturned by the two behemoths. Chapter 11:14. Devil Clan, Ghost Clan, they are fighting. The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. In the impression of the Jojo humans, both were terrible and ferocious existences. But they suddenly appeared in the Central Prefecture and were fighting each other. However, judging from the result, the Ghost Clan was obviously at a disadvantage. Die! The Central Prefecture's king roared and attacked with all his strength again. How could the Ghost Clan's great emperor fight back after losing the Underworld Pearl? He immediately shouted, "Where is the Ghost Realm army?" Chi chi chi, from below the ruins, a huge black cloud suddenly rose. Eerie ghost cries came from the cloud, and the figures of the Ghost Clan could be vaguely seen. Kill! In the ghost cloud, Bai Lingtian pointed at the Central Prefecture's king below. Suddenly, the huge ghost cloud shone down like the sky was collapsing. At the same time, each of the Ghost Clan in the cloud held a piece of black chain, and all of their chains were tightly connected. The ghost cloud shrouded, accompanied by the sound of chains colliding. The chains wrapped around the Central Prefecture's king. It looked like they were going to lock the Central Prefecture's king alive. These chains were made of special materials in the Ghost Realm, known as the first divine wood in the Ghost Realm, and were strong and indestructible. Sensing the existence of the chains, the Central Prefecture's king was furious. Ghost! Prison! Big! Emperor! These chains were made for me. Such a chain was obviously prepared to lock up a mortal fairy. In this way, the resources he had been secretly helping the Ghost Realm army for 100 years were all used to support the enemy in the end. Thinking of this, the Central Prefecture's king was furious. He was betrayed for 100 years and helped the enemy without knowing it. Go to hell! The Ghost Clan's great emperor roared and hit the sky with his palms. Suddenly, the whole ghost cloud was blown away, and the Ghost Clan suffered countless casualties. This blow killed more than half of the Ghost Realm army. The Ghost Clan's great emperor was in pain. These were the elites of the Ghost Clan, but they died under the Central Prefecture's king's punch. Fortunately, the chains were successfully attached to the Central Prefecture's king, and his hands were bound. Kill! In the remaining ghost cloud, Bai Lingtian's command sounded again. Suddenly, many long spears filled with dense ghost chi condensed in the ghost clouds. They were filled with extremely dense ghost chi. Su Yu recognized it at first glance. Isn't this the extreme evil ghost energy in Mo Tianxuan's body? This ghostly chi belonged to the ghost prison's great emperor. In other words, these ghostly chi spears were all refined by the ghost prison's great emperor one by one, and it took him no less than a few decades to do so. In order to kill the Central Prefecture's king, the Ghost Realm really spared no effort. Roar with an earth-shattering roar of pain, thousands upon thousands of spears condensed from extreme evil ghost chi stabbed into his body. Once it pierced through, the entire spear turned into extremely evil ghost energy and surged into the body of the Central Prefecture's king, wreaking havoc in his body. Even the Central Prefecture's king, who had transformed into a demonic body, was in great pain. But it was precisely because of the pain that the Central Prefecture's king's demonic nature was aroused. His eyes became more and more blood-red, and an ominous glint surged into the sky. He looked up to the sky and let out a roar that shook the 9 regions. "All of you deserve to die." Bang! An earth-shattering explosion was heard. His arms kept colliding, and the veins on his face twisted. As he struggled with all his might, the chains broke inch by inch, turning into countless shards that shot into the sky. In an instant, countless screams rang out. All the ghosts that were struck by the chains had their bodies smashed into smithereens. Even their souls couldn't escape in time. In just a few breaths, the remaining ghost clouds in the sky were less than 1/10 of the original. A full 90%, tens of thousands of ghost elites were killed. The ghost prison's great emperor had no time to feel distressed. Without saying anything, he turned around and grabbed Su Yu and Qin Xianer, and immediately chose to escape. It was a mistake. No one knew that the Central Prefecture's king had hidden his identity as a descendant of the human god and the demon god, causing decades of preparation to be in vain. However, the Central Prefecture's king hated the betrayal of the ghost prison's great emperor. How could he give him a chance to escape? Demonic origin ripple. The Central Prefecture's king roared, stretched out his palm, and pointed to the ghost prison's great emperor. From the palm of his hand, a dark halo appeared, and layers of runes appeared on the surface of the halo. With a roar, the halo hit the ghost prison's great emperor with the momentum of teleportation. The ghost prison's great emperor was shocked. He could perceive that this halo was enough to destroy his body and soul. "Mo Tianxian, what are you waiting for?" At the critical moment, the ghost prison's great emperor shouted. Su Yu listened and was not surprised. He sighed, "This woman really has a far-reaching plan." Swish! Suddenly, from the underground of the Central Prefecture's palace, a very bright beam of light, 100 feet thick, spurted out. The beam of light happened to be under the feet of the Central Prefecture's king. In that beam of light there is a strong power of the mortal fairy, and it is far more than the power of the mortal fairy. If it is guarded against, even if the mortal fairies of Jiuzhou gather, they may not be able to do anything to the Central Prefecture's king. However, the Central Prefecture's king was caught off guard and was hit head-on. His body was immediately smashed. The huge demon body was broken everywhere, his legs were badly mutilated, and the bones of his legs were visible. There were cracks in his chest, and the internal organs were clearly visible. Half of his head was beaten off, half of it was a human face, and the other half was a skeleton. His dark and messy hair covered a small half of his face, and a blood-red demon eye pierced through the black hair, which looked more gloomy and terrible. At this moment, the Central Prefecture's king did not have half of the spirit of a human state king, and he was already a ferocious demon. Mo Tianxian. With a roar, the Central Prefecture's king's huge demon foot suddenly stepped down. Rumble! Hearing the loud sound of the earth, the whole central continent felt this sudden great shock. Under this foot, the ruins of the Central Prefecture city were swept in all directions by the powerful shock wave. With the right foot of the Central Prefecture's king as the center, the area within a radius of 100,000 miles was collapsed. The soil on the earth was shaken up, revealing the extremely hard crust. Now it could be clearly seen that there was a dark hole of 100 feet on the edge of the right foot of the Central Prefecture's king, which was filled with deep ghost energy. Anyone who had been to the Red Blood Palace to investigate the sudden arrival of the Ghost Clan army could recognize that the Ghost Cave under the Central Prefecture city was similar to the Ghost Cave under the Red Blood Palace. To be precise, the two were connected. All the people of the Red Blood Palace were missing, and no bones were left. They didn't disappear, but they entered the huge ghost cave. Along the underground tunnel, they crossed half of the central continent and quietly lurked under the central prefecture city, ready to give the central prefecture's king a fatal blow at any time. Swish! A woman in a black dress flew out of the cave with a cold and arrogant face. She was Tianxian, who had been missing for a long time. A dignified human colluded with the ghost clan. The central prefecture's king stared at Tianxian coldly with his blood-red demon eye. Tianxian did not care, but said, as a descendant of the demon clan who is ready to sell the Jiuzhou continent, do you have the right to say that to me? All the strong human beings were stunned. The Red Blood Palace of the Blessed and Heavenly Lands colluded with the Ghost Clan? Qin Xianer said in disbelief. I'm confused. When did the Red Blood Palace ally with the Ghost Clan? Su Yu said with a faint smile, 100 years ago. 100 years ago? Wasn't 100 years ago the most tragic time of the war between humans and ghosts? Qin Xianer was confused. Su Yu said, it was indeed tragic, but because it was tragic, no one suspected it. Even the Central Prefecture's king did not expect the betrayal of the Ghost Prison's great emperor. But it is absolutely true that the Central Prefecture's king and the Ghost Prison's great emperor allied 100 years ago and killed the emperor of Jiuzhou, Shen Yichen. Is it necessary to make such a great sacrifice to gain the Central Prefecture's king's trust? Also, countless strong human beings were sacrificed at that time. Qin Xianer said in confusion. Su Yu touched the 9-jade spiritual pearl on his arm. A dog bone with 100 characters printed on it and a crystal ball appeared in Su Yu's palm. Su Yu inserted the dog bone into the crystal ball, and the crystal ball broke. A trace of breath gradually flowed out from the crystal ball. Yes, a very familiar breath. Lord Sacred Kailan, you can explain it to me. Su Yu said with a faint smile. Shinichen? Sacred Kailan? Qin Xianer's little mouth opened wide. She had heard of both, but the former had been dead for 100 years, and the latter had been dead for about 10,000 years. Ahem. What scared Qin Xianer was that someone in the crystal ball said, well, Su Yu, it's not fun if you are so smart. I, Kailan, am going to give you a surprise. With a crisp sound, the crystal ball cracked open like an eggshell. A small purple Kailan broke out of the crystal ball. It was about the size of a palm, and it was exquisite and cute. It did not look like the mighty and domineering mysterious heavenly divine pavilion at all. However, that breath was Sacred Kailan's. Su Yu accelerated the refining of the bloodline of the cultivation deity and said with a faint smile, you are indeed a cunning dog, Kailan. Even before you die, you left a trace of great path divine source origin, sealed in the crystal ball, and lied to me that you can randomly choose a fairy artifact from the crystal ball. You are really something. When the dead dog gave this crystal ball to Su Yu alone, Su Yu felt that it was unusual, so he did not open it for a long time. Who could have thought that Sacred Kailan, who should have died in the space of the 100th floor of the Martial Tower, was still alive? In the crystal ball, there was a trace of great path divine source origin left by it. This was a clone left by Sacred Kailan in the world. If it grew up, it might be able to return to the peak of its cultivation. In this way, there was a possibility of continuation. Hey, there is no other way, is there? If this was a useless crystal ball, you would have thrown it into the latrine. Sacred Kailan laughed, without any shame. Su Yu rolled his eyes at him and said, it seems that the time for me to summon you is not wrong. The Jiuzhou continent is about to be sold. If I don't summon you now, I am afraid there will be no chance. Hearing this, the small Sacred Kailan squatted on the broken eggshell and stared at the Central Prefecture's king with its nostrils, with a face of contempt and disdain. A bastard of a human and a demon wants to sell my cave? After 100 years of planning, it is time to close the net. The Ghost Prison's great emperor, who was tired of dealing with the waves of great path demon source, saw sacred Kailan and could not help but show great joy. Senior Shinichen, no, God Kailan, save me! Chapter 11:15. The sacred Kailan twitched its mouth. With only a strand of celestial energy sphere left, it was like a newborn baby. Its combat power was even lower than that of the wild demons. How could it resist the demonic energy sphere? If it didn't make a move, someone else would. Boom! Suddenly, a bone-chilling white sword light shot out from the ghost cave. The sword was so sharp that it could cut everything into pieces. Crack! The demonic energy sphere was divided into two parts by the sword light and flew out from both sides of the ghost prison's great emperor. A white-robed woman appeared in the ghost cave as well. Her features were picturesque, and her features were beautiful. At first glance, she actually resembled Bing Wuxin. However, she was more mature, beautiful, graceful, and noble than Bing Wuxin. She was the prefecture king of the lifeless sword prefecture, Jian Wusheng. That beam of light just now contained the power of her sword. I am Jian Wusheng, the broken sword god Kailan. Thank you for your guidance 100 years ago. Today, I am willing to eliminate the evil for you. Jian Wusheng bowed to the sacred Kailan with her sword. The sacred Kailan nodded with satisfaction. I am very satisfied that you still remember your promise 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the proud sword venerable returned from the glittering jewel wonderland and made great progress. She broke through the barrier and became a mortal fairy. Some people said she had obtained a great opportunity in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, so she could become a mortal fairy. However, no one knew what kind of opportunity it was. Only Jian Wusheng knew that she was enlightened by the black dog that the sacred Kailan had transformed into. Another prefecture king? The central prefecture's king snorted as he glanced at Jian Wusheng disdainfully. Then, he stared at the sacred Kailan and said, "You have a familiar aura." The sacred Kailan lifted its neck and said with a sneer, "My good apprentice, have you forgotten your master so quickly?" With a flash of purple light, the sacred Kailan turned into a human. It was an ordinary-looking old man. He looked so ordinary that no one would take a second look at him in the crowd. However, many people in the area were shocked. Lord Shinichen? Impossible! Is that the Jiuzhou Emperor Shinichen? How could this be? Didn't Lord Shinichen die a long time ago? Only Su Yu let out a sigh of relief, and said a name that he had almost forgotten. Long time no see, old housekeeper? Su Yu sighed. The old housekeeper, Fan Haixing, was an old man transformed from the remnant soul of Shinichen. Now, of Shinichen had reappeared in the Jiuzhou continent. The pupils of the central prefecture's king contracted fiercely. His face was filled with shock, bewilderment, and confusion. He said, "It's really you, Shinichen. The sacred Kailan of Shinichen. No, Shun of God of Lin of King of the King of the world. Since I perished, there have been many extraterrestrial forces trying to take over my cavern world. Fortunately, I made a lot of friends when I was alive. With their protection, no one dared to take over my cavern world for a while. Until hundreds of years ago, a friend told me that a member of the world of divine remains had sneaked into my cavern world and was ready to seize this world. Therefore, I transformed into Shinichen and was ready to unify the 9 regions. I just wanted to see who the person behind the scenes was. If he wanted to sell the 9 regions, he had to at least unify the 9 regions. It could be imagined that if Shinichen unified the 9 states, the members of the world of divine remains would definitely sabotage it. I thought that person would be the most mysterious Duanxian cliff master, so I was always on guard against him. I never thought that he would be my disciple, you. The sacred Kailan had a complicated look in its eyes, and it was full of emotion. You hid yourself so well, and your aptitude is so top-notch. If you hadn't exposed yourself in advance, I would have handed the 9 states over to you. Unfortunately, even I didn't expect that the disciple I took in because I valued talent was a member of the world of divine remains. In fact, the sacred Kylan could not be blamed. When it suddenly heard that someone had come to seize the cavern world, the suspect must be a strong person with such ability. At that time, the severed fairy cliff master had just come to the 9 states, and his strength was extraordinary. Naturally, he was regarded as a suspect. The Central Prefecture's king took a deep breath and said, "So, the so-called war between humans and ghosts was actually a chaotic situation arranged by you?" "Yes," the sacred Kiran said. "If I didn't create an opportunity for you, would you have attacked me?" The Central Prefecture's king thought about it carefully and shook his head. No. With the strength of the Jojo Emperor at that time, he would never have attacked unless it was necessary. Falling into the situation of fighting with the Ghost Prison's great emperor was the best time for him to attack. "You are so calculative." The Central Prefecture's king took a breath and felt a sense of admiration. Who could have expected that the tragic war between humans and ghosts was actually arranged by Shenichen, and the purpose was to draw out the mastermind behind the scenes? The sacred Kylan smiled and said, "Others also praised me like this." "So, you planned for 100 years?" the Central Prefecture's king said. The sacred Kylan nodded proudly. "Hey, of course, I am a dead god after all. The strength of the remaining celestial source origin is weak. If I appeared rashly, I would only be caught by you. Therefore, when I found out your hidden strength, I pretended to escape into the small cavern world that I created, the Zhenlong continent, to give you the illusion that Shen Yichen was lingering on. In fact, in the past 100 years, I have been planning in the Jojo continent, with the purpose of training enough experts to kill you one day. Unfortunately, the luck of the Jojo continent declined, and there was no one who could master the celestial destroying arrow for a long time. Therefore, I made several other arrangements. First, I made the Ghost Clan continue to pretend to ally with you, deceive you into trusting me, and give you a fatal blow at the critical time. Second, I looked for suitable helpers. At the end of his words, he looked at Mo Tianxian thoughtfully. Now it seems that everything is as expected. After 100 years, a sword genius like Jian Wuxing was born, and she became a powerful helper. The Ghost Clan also protected the celestial destroying arrow and Su Yu at the critical time. After hearing that, Su Yu and Qin Xianer couldn't speak for a long time. It turned out that the Zhenlong continent they lived in was actually a small cavern world created by the sacred Kylan. Its destruction originated from a plot and conspiracy that had been planned for 100 years. Everything that the sacred Kylan did was to cultivate strong people and forces to fight against the Central Prefecture's king, who was a member of the world of divine remains. As for why he didn't cultivate the rest of the prefecture's kings, maybe he was afraid that the news would be leaked. It was hard to tell what was in a man's heart. A dead deity couldn't deter these prefecture's kings. It was impossible to predict whether they would secretly collude with the Central Prefecture's king to kill the remaining celestial energy sphere of the sacred Kylan. Therefore, he was so cautious and waited for 100 years. "Is this the situation you are waiting for?" After hearing that, the Central Prefecture's king sneered with pity. "A group of mobs. Do you expect them to protect Su Yu and the celestial destroying arrow?" After saying that, the Central Prefecture's king punched out. This punch covered all the strong people in all directions. It was a punch, but it hit everyone at the same time. Of course, Su Yu was the key target. Seeing that, the Ghost Clan's great emperor changed his face slightly. Then, he grabbed Su Yu and Qin Xianer and kept retreating. Seeing that, the little Kylan jumped onto Su Yu's shoulder and was taken away by the Central Prefecture's king. As for Jian Wuxing, she easily shattered the fist energy with a sweep of her sword. Her body just shook a few times. The most shocking thing was that Mo Tianxian took out the flying guillotine casually, circled around her, and easily dispersed the fist force. She stood motionless on the spot, and a trace of the mortal fairy's strength lingered around her. The mortal fairy's strength? Haven't you been infected by the extreme evil ghost energy? Haven't you been looking for a way to get rid of it all over the world? The Central Prefecture's king was slightly surprised, but his voice stopped abruptly. Since Emo Tianxian and the Ghost Clan's great emperor conspired to put on a big show 100 years ago, how could Emo Tianxian really be hurt? Maybe the extreme evil ghost energy left in her body was used to confuse him and make him relax his vigilance. Everyone knew that Emo Tianxuan's cultivation stayed at the peak of the all-creations realm because of the extreme evil ghost energy. She couldn't take a step forward, and she was looking for a way to get rid of it. Otherwise, the Central Prefecture's king, who was very close to her, would not relax his vigilance against her. He didn't even know that she had dug a ghost cave under the Central Prefecture's imperial palace in 100 years. You hid your strength really well. You would rather be injured by my projection than expose your strength, the Central Prefecture's king said coldly. When Emo Tianxian hunted down the 5 golden light guards, they used the Central Prefecture's token to summon the projection of the Central Prefecture's king. Emo Tianxian would rather be injured and her life threatened than expose her cultivation. Her forbearance was amazing. Hearing that, Emo Tianxian snorted slightly and couldn't help but glance at Suyu. Cold sweat appeared on Suyu's forehead and he felt guilty. At that time, he not only molested her unintentionally, but also sold her fairy artifact, the flying guillotine. Now he thought about it. Fortunately, she really fainted. Cut the crap. It's time to put an end to the century-old hatred. Emo Tianxian frowned and started to attack. Like a black ghost, the flying guillotine teleported to the top of the Central Prefecture's king's head and scratched his head. With a dull sound, the top of the Central Prefecture's king's head was scratched. At the same time, Jian Wuxing waved her sword with great tacit understanding. Sword Technique Universe. There were 3 realms of the sword doctrine. Sword moves at your will, undying sword body, and the last realm was the ultimate realm of the sword doctrine, Sword Technique Universe. When the sword was waved, endless sword lights appeared in the sky and the earth and penetrated the top of the Central Prefecture's king's head. The endless sword lights entered the Central Prefecture's king's body and destroyed everything inside it crazily. However, the Central Prefecture's king just snorted coldly. Then, he smashed his head with his palm. At the same time, he grabbed all the sword energy in his head with his demonic claw. The Central Prefecture's king, who only had half of his head left, was unscathed. Then, he patted both of his palms which were stained with blood. Emo Tianxian and Jian Wuxing tried their best to resist the boundless demonic claw. Jian Wuxing performed the ultimate sword doctrine again to resist the power of the demonic claw. Chapter 11:16. This palm was powerful enough to destroy Jian Wuxing's body and soul. At this critical moment, Jian Wuxing spat out a mouthful of blood, which stained the long sword in her hand. Then, she shouted in a low voice, "Shifting shadows." Instantly, the demonic palm arrived. However, the blood-stained sword was smashed into pieces by the demonic palm. Not far away, Jian Wuxing's figure flashed, and her figure staggered as she appeared. Her face was pale. The Central Prefecture's king was too powerful to be defeated by ordinary forces. Palace Master Emo, it's up to you now. The other demonic palm landed on Emo Tianxuan's body successfully. Then, the Central Prefecture's king said with a hideous smile, "A bunch of mobs. Do you really want to kill me?" However, his expression suddenly changed, and he could not help but look at the other demonic palm. He did land on Emo Tianxuan's body, but he didn't smash it into pieces. Then, Emo Tianxian took out a beautiful cyan sword from her sleeve and pointed it at the center of the demonic palm. The sword seemed to be launched casually, but it managed to block the demonic palm. A bunch of mobs? I don't like this word. Emo Tianxian turned over her palm, and the cyan sword flew across the demonic palm. Instantly, the entire demonic palm was cut into 2 parts, leaving a smooth cut. How could she use swordsmanship? Apart from Suyu, all the people present were shocked by what he had just witnessed. Suyu had seen Emotianxuan's undying sword body in the martial tower, so he knew she was a hidden swordsman. Master! A voice that very few people could hear entered Suyu's ears. Suyu was shocked. Then, he looked sideways and was surprised. Jian Wuxing, who had retreated to one side, was looking at the valiant Mo Tianxian from afar with reverence. Could it be that Jian Wuxing, who had enlightened the world with her swordsmanship, got her swordsmanship from Mo Tianxian? If so, how powerful was Mo Tianxuan's swordsmanship? The Central Prefecture's king was stunned. Then, he stared at the cyan sword in Jian Wuxing's hand in horror. It was definitely an ordinary low-grade fairy artifact. However, how could its power be more powerful than the third realm of swordsmanship, the sword world? A sense of danger entered the Central Prefecture's king's heart. Suddenly, the Central Prefecture's king revealed a look of disbelief and said in surprise, Could it be that you are a descendant of the sword god's bloodline, and you are innately proficient in the divine-level sword spirit? The god-level sword intent was a general concept. It was the sword god's sword intent, and it wasn't something the so-called 3 realms of the sword Dao could compare to. Mo Tianxian said calmly, You don't have to know that. Qila, with another strike of the sword, the Central Prefecture's king's arm, which was more than 500 feet long, was chopped off. A trace of panic finally appeared on the face of the Central Prefecture's king, and he said furiously, So what if you are the descendant of the sword god? Those who stand in my way will be killed. Saint Demon burns the heavens. The Central Prefecture's king roared. His whole body was covered with layers of golden flames. That was the divine tribulation fire. Even the peak mortal fairies would have to avoid it. As expected, Mo Tianxian frowned and retreated. She was rather fearful of the boundless divine fire. However, Mo Tianxian had never been one to bow her head. She snorted coldly and advanced with her sword. Sword connecting divinity realm. Qi, a strand of sword intent that didn't belong to the mortal world, rushed out from the sword abruptly. Mo Tianxian and her sword split the raging divine fire and penetrated the body of the Central Prefecture's king like light and shadow. With a painful roar, the Central Prefecture's king kept growing out of his body one after another, as if there were countless swords growing out of his body. Especially the sword in his chest, which pierced through his heart and came out of his chest. Moreover, the longer the swords grew, the weaker the vitality of the Central Prefecture's king became. When the body of the Central Prefecture's king was covered by hundreds of thousands of swords, the body of the Central Prefecture's king could no longer be seen. Only the dense and endless swords could be seen. The aura of the Central Prefecture's king also dissipated abruptly, along with his soul. The whole area was in dead silence. The Central Prefecture's king, the most powerful demon on the continent, was killed by a single strike of the sword just like that. The onlookers looked at Mo Tianxian as if they were looking at a terrible goddess of war. Who in the world could resist this strike of the sword? Frame, the small cyan sword in Mo Tianxuan's hand fell to the ground. Her hand, which was holding the small sword, trembled unceasingly. A meandering stream of blood flowed down along her arm. The onlookers were shocked. When they fixed their eyes on Mo Tianxian, they found there was a huge bloody hole in her chest, from which the divine fire was still burning. She killed the Central Prefecture's king, but she was also seriously injured by the divine fire. Not only her flesh and blood were burned, but her soul was also injured. She couldn't even lift up her sword, let alone launch another strike like this. Master! Jian Wuxing rushed over and held Mo Tianxian, who was about to fall to the ground. She said anxiously, Master, why did you force yourself to use this move? This is a move that injures the enemy but also injures yourself. It was more than just injuring herself. She almost died together with her enemy. Even if the divine fire didn't injure her, this move had exhausted all of her strength. Humph! I don't need you to tell me what to do. Mo Tianxian snorted, but she had no strength left in her body. After a long time, the ghost prison's great emperor broke the silence. Looking at the miserable death of the Central Prefecture's king, he said with relief, "After staying dormant for 100 years, you finally killed the demon. Congratulations, God Kylan." The god Kylan also had a complicated expression on his face. He felt relaxed and a little bit regretful. Why was such an outstanding person a member of the world of divine remains? What a pity! The onlookers gradually felt relaxed. The demon was dead, and the shadow that had covered the Jiuzhou continent for 100 years could disappear. However, among all the onlookers, only Su Yu was frowning. Although the Central Prefecture's king was dead, the depression brought by his ordeal of human didn't disappear. Instead, it became more and more serious. He couldn't help but remind them, "Don't be careless. After all, he is the Central Prefecture's king." Before confirming it, we must be careful, however. Before he finished his words, the numerous swords penetrated the demon's body, which looked like a hedgehog, and a strong golden light burst out from inside to outside. The golden light contained a very familiar aura. The glittering jeweled demonic god's celestial energy sphere. Su Yu and the sacred Kylan said at the same time. Both of their faces suddenly became serious and extremely ugly. Could it be that he had signed a contract with the glittering jeweled demonic god? Ha 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 ha! As the demon's body broke out into wild laughter, everyone's heart sank. The ghost prison's great emperor was shocked. He has been resurrected. Could it be that he has a contract with a god? He was no stranger to this contract, and neither was Su Yu. In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, the demon-devouring emperor was willing to be a slave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy and obtained the contract of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Unless the glittering jewel mortal fairy's celestial energy sphere was exhausted, she was almost immortal. No matter how many times she was killed, she could be resurrected on the spot. With the cultivation of the Central Prefecture's king, the celestial energy sphere consumed by one resurrection was a huge burden that the glittering jewel mortal fairy couldn't bear. Presumably, the glittering jewel mortal fairy would never allow him to continue to consume his celestial energy sphere. Sure enough, a circle of light flashed between the eyebrows of the Central Prefecture's king. Ha ha ha, that stupid woman thought she could use me. She didn't know that I was using her. I took half of her celestial energy sphere and resurrected her. She must be mad now, right? The demon laughed up to the sky, and hundreds of thousands of swords grew out of his body. With a light shout, they were shaken away, and the body of the Central Prefecture's king was revealed. When they saw his body, the hearts of everyone present sank fiercely, and they practically sank to the bottom of the valley. The Central Prefecture's king was not only resurrected, but also his injuries were healed by the celestial energy sphere. The death airflow in his body, the body that was smashed by the light beam, the head that was smashed, and the arm that was cut off were all healed. The Central Prefecture's king reappeared in front of them in his heyday. At this moment, even Su Yu felt desperate. Fight! The ghost prison's great emperor gritted his teeth, put down Su Yu and Qin Xianer, and shouted. He sacrificed the 8 underworld pearls that he had found, lined them up in a circle, and took the initiative to attack. Jian Wuxing also gritted her teeth, put down the seriously injured Mo Tianxian, and rushed up with her sword. The remaining ghost forces condensed into a large mass of ghost clouds and rushed up again, with chains and extremely evil ghost spears. Even if they knew it was hopeless, they still wanted to stop him. The Central Prefecture's king sneered, as if he was watching a group of ants rushing towards him. A motley crew. The Central Prefecture's king stretched out 2 giant demon palms, each of which condensed a divine fire, and shot it at the ghost prison's great emperor and Jian Wuxing. The two great mortal fairies also rushed up, gnashing their teeth. However, in the face of absolute power, their magical powers and precious skills were like ants trying to shake a tree. A mass of divine fire bombarded the 8 underworld pearls. The revolving underworld pearls could not bear the terrible power of the divine fire, and were burned and cracked. The 8 underworld pearls were burned and cracked one by one. The remaining 20% of the divine fire turned into a sharp arrow and penetrated the chest of the ghost prison's great emperor. With a scream, the ghost prison's great emperor was covered with golden flames, and became a burning man. If he didn't use the extremely evil ghost energy to force the divine fire out of his body little by little, he would have been turned into ashes at this moment. Jian Wuxing was not much better. She had lost her celestial sword, so she could only use her fingers to replace the sword and condense the supreme sword essence, world of sword art. In an instant, the infinite sword light cut toward the divine fire. However, the sword light was quickly buried in the divine fire like a moth flying into the fire. The remaining divine fire burned Jian Wuxing directly. She didn't have the extremely evil ghost energy to resist the divine fire like the ghost prison's great emperor, so her body was burned. Fortunately, her soul left her body and escaped in time. Between the two great mortal fairies, one was seriously injured, and the other's body was broken. This was the power of the Central Prefecture's king in his peak state. Mo Tianxian might not be able to hurt him even if she used the divine sword realm again. The Central Prefecture's king sneered. 100 years of planning? 100 years of planning? It's just a joke. Mo Tianxian gritted her teeth. Damn the deity contract. 100 years of planning failed in a single move. Mo Tianxian was seriously injured, the ghost prison's great emperor was seriously injured, and Jian Wuxing only had her soul left. In this world, who could stop the Central Prefecture's king? Chapter 11:17. The unstoppable tribulation fire was about to annihilate all of them. Suddenly, a rich power of the 5 elements traversed across the void from the distant horizon. A colorful mountain flew out of the huge crack in the void and flew toward this place at high speed. Before the mountain arrived, the power of the 5 elements contained in the mountain had already arrived. It condensed into a tornado, and swept the divine fire that was attacking the sacred Kirin and the others into the clouds. The Central Prefecture's king turned around coldly and sneered, "There are still people who don't know the difference between life and death to stop me." Looking at the foot of the 5 elements mountain, there were 2 figures, one in black and the other in white. They exerted the strength of the mortal fairies to carry the 5 elements mountain across the void. Swish! The next moment they flew to the sacred Kylin and put the mountain down. Then, they activated the spell formation at the foot of the mountain. The spell formation was infused with the remaining power of the demon god in their bodies. The spell formation absorbed the force of the 5 elements mountain to protect the sacred Kylin and the others. Black and white mortal fairies? Mo Tianxian was surprised. The eastern continent had always been peaceful and mysterious. Why did they get involved in the dispute between them and the Central Prefecture's king? Couldn't they see the situation clearly? Even with their help, they couldn't hold on for a long time. The black and white mortal fairies didn't look back. They stared at the Central Prefecture's king and said resolutely, "As the king of the Jiuzhou continent, how can you ignore the demon clan?" After settling down the people of the eastern continent, they came here immediately. After a discussion, they decided to return to the great Oriental family and brought the 5 elements mountain to the Central Prefecture. Just in time, the sacred Kylin and the others were in danger. Alas! You shouldn't have come here. The sacred Kylin sighed with a dim look. The plan of hundreds of years was in vain. The arrival of the black and white mortal fairies would only increase the casualties. The situation was hopeless. We have already died once. Why should we cherish our lives? Even if we die, we will drag the Central Prefecture's king down with us. the black and white mortal fairies said at the same time. The force of the 5 elements was getting stronger and stronger. The whole eastern continent could feel the inexplicable pressure. The central prefecture's king, who was close by, could sense the existence of the force of the 5 elements. The black and white mortal immortals looked at each other and shouted. Then they raised the 5 elements mountain and threw it toward the central prefecture's king. This seemingly simple throw almost exhausted all the strength of the black and white mortal fairies. The 2 of them collapsed to the ground and almost passed out on the spot. There was not a bit of mortal fairies' strength left in their bodies. It could be seen that this throw was no small matter. We've studied the 5 elements mountain for many years, but this is as far as we can go. I hope it will be useful. Rumble, the 5 elements mountain flew out. In an instant, colorful lights flew out from the inside of the mountain, especially the bottom of the mountain, which burst out bright lights and enveloped the central prefecture's king. The central prefecture's king wanted to avoid it, but he found that the colorful light contained enormous power of the 5 elements, which slowed his movement. Unable to avoid it, he was pressed down by the 5 elements mountain. At the same time, there was also the extremely strong power of the 5 elements. The black and white mortal fairies and God Kylan's eyes lit up at the same time. Could this method work? After all, this was a mountain that had once suppressed a god to death. If it could unleash its power, it would definitely be extremely terrifying. However, the next moment, a scene that made all of them depressed suddenly happened. The central prefecture's king grabbed upwards with one hand, and the whole 5 elements mountain was lifted up by one hand. He sneered. If you have reached the 2nd stage of the mortal fairy, I will be afraid of the power of this throw. Unfortunately, the power of 2 mortal fairies at the 1st stage is less than 1/10 of the power of a mortal fairy at the 2nd stage. Throwing the 5 elements mountain aside, the central prefecture's king sneered. It's over, but who will die first? His eyes wandered around the group of disabled mortal fairies, and he was very playful. The ghost prison's emperor was unwilling to be humiliated, so he shouted coldly, "If you want to kill us, just kill us. Do you think we will beg for mercy from you?" Because even if they begged for mercy, the central prefecture's king would not let them go. The central prefecture's king's eyes fell on him, and he said coldly, "Since you are the first one, let's start with you." Sizzle! A divine fire suddenly spurted out. However, the target of the fire was not the ghost prison's emperor, but Su Yu. "Little bastard, I will be relieved to kill you first." The central prefecture's king sneered. The ghost prison's emperor's face changed abruptly, and he teleported in front of Su Yu without thinking, blocking the divine fire. Poof! With a muffled sound, the ghost prison's emperor's body turned into ashes, leaving only a soul surrounded by ghost energy to escape from the divine fire. Even so, the ghost prison's emperor still stood in front of Su Yu, protecting him until the last moment. The central prefecture's king sneered, "It's really touching, but as a traitor, isn't it the best ending for you to die without a burial place?" Sizzle! A huge ball of divine fire, half a foot in size, transformed into a spear and pierced through the void. "No. Be careful." Seeing this scene, Mo Tianxian, Jian Wusheng, and even the black and white mortal fairies and others were extremely angry. The ghost prison's emperor had no chance of surviving. The ghost prison's emperor was not afraid, and he did not flinch. Instead, he looked death calmly and laughed loudly. "Central Prefecture's king, you will not have a good end." The crazy laughter made the Central Prefecture's king frown. He couldn't understand why the ghost prison's emperor was so persistent in helping Jiuzhou. This was not the ghost realm. Was it necessary for him to work so hard for Jiuzhou? Madman! The Central Prefecture's king snorted and was too lazy to watch anymore. Anyway, the end was doomed. Both he and Su Yu would be turned into ashes in the divine fire. But suddenly, the Central Prefecture's king's heart suddenly beat, and a strong sense of anxiety suddenly rose. This kind of anxiety, since breaking through to the fairy realm, has never appeared again. The last time was 1,000 years ago, when he was at the peak of the all-creation realm. He was exploring a desolate cavern world, and he was chased by a wild beast of the mortal fairy realm. This chase lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. During these 3 days, he was on the run all the time. If he stopped for a while, the man-eating monster behind him would catch up with him. That kind of constant anxiety, that kind of panic that may die at any time and anywhere, accompanied his life for hundreds of years. Many years later, he occasionally woke up from his meditation and remembered the scene of his narrow escape. Later, when he broke through to the mortal fairy realm, he turned back to kill the wild beast, and the anxiety that lasted for hundreds of years finally dissipated. Until today, after 1,000 years, he never had that kind of strong anxiety again. But at this moment, the feeling that he almost thought he had forgotten came to his heart without warning. It seemed that the wild beast that he had killed had come back, standing behind him, looking down at him greedily, and slowly opening its bloody mouth, ready to bite him at any time. Almost subconsciously, the central prefecture's king's body shook, and his heart beat wildly. He turned his head almost in fear. There was no wild beast, but a figure stood up and stared at him coldly. The cold, dark eyes made him feel like he was facing a wild beast. His heart twitched fiercely, and his hands and feet were cold. He said, "Sue." Sue said lightly, "Just in time, 9 days are up." The tribulation of human broke out at this moment. Looking at the 5 feet of divine fire, Sue calmly stepped out. With this step, 9 dark, scorching suns surrounded Su's chest, like 9 suns protecting him. The divine fire couldn't break through the 9 suns. At the last moment, he finally refined the last trace of the bloodline of the cultivation deity, and his cultivation soared to the peak of the mortal fairy realm. Under such a realm, the great sun punishment fairy painting was like water flowing into a canal, easily refining the remaining 7 blazing suns. One was the tribulation of Thunderfeather, and the other was the tribulation of divine fire. No one could defeat the other. The central prefecture's king finally calmed down and took a breath to suppress the panic in his heart. Then he released a more powerful divine fire, which shrouded Sue like a fire cloud. However, in the divine fire, Su's figure didn't change at all. He walked out of the fire cloud step by step and came to the central prefecture's king. "Do you have any other moves to prepare?" Die. The central prefecture's king suddenly punched Su's small body with his fist, which was full of the power of the demon god. The power of the demonic palm, which was like a small mountain, was unstoppable. The earth shook and a space crack was broken into pieces. Bang! The whole earth shook when the fist was punched. Emotianxian and the others opened their eyes wide and stared at the situation under the demonic fist in the fog. When the fog dissipated, they were a little relieved. Under the demonic fist, Sue raised his right hand and pointed at the palm of the demonic fist with his index finger. Su's finger showed a strange golden color at this moment. It didn't look like a human finger, and golden scales could be seen vaguely. Sue looked calm and said indifferently, "Break." Boom. The golden finger seemed to be full of the power of creation. A golden beam of light, which frightened all the mortal fairies, penetrated the demonic palm, went all the way along the arm through the shoulder armor, and passed through the head of the central prefecture's king. Bang! When the golden beam of light rushed out, there was a bang sound. The fist and arm of the central prefecture's king were all blown up. On the right side of the head, there was a deep blood groove, which was so deep that the bone could be seen. Just one finger could do such a thing. Even Emotianxian didn't reach this level before. This is more than the power of the peak mortal fairy, right? The ghost prison's great emperor looked at the golden beam of light dissipating in the sky and shivered. Emotianxian said calmly, "No, in the golden beam of light, there is a breath of the dragon god." The period of 9 days was also the time when the 10 real dragon spirit veins were integrated into Su Yu's body and the body of the 9 dragons was achieved. The Central Prefecture's king was shocked that he was at a disadvantage in this fight. It's not over yet. The Central Prefecture's king was unwilling to give up, and his huge demonic foot stepped on the air. Now the Central Prefecture's king had an illusion that Su Yu was still an ant that could be easily crushed to death, an ant that could be crushed to death with 1 foot. How could he admit that an ant was on an equal footing with him? Destroy! Su Yu said a word indifferently. His whole right fist was covered with golden scales, and he punched the foot of the Central Prefecture's demonic foot very calmly. Chapter 11:18. With a bang, the right foot, leg, and right half of the body of the Central Prefecture's king exploded with a loud bang. Even his neck was blasted off by the golden pillar of light, leaving only his spine connected to his head. Smashing half of the body of the Central Prefecture's king with a single punch. At this moment, the Central Prefecture's king finally recovered from the cruelty. His pupils shrank and his back was covered with cold sweat. He had definitely reached the peak of the mortal fairy's power. Coupled with the golden power, even a peak mortal fairy would not be a match for him. Moreover, Su Yu hadn't used the celestial destroying arrow yet. Run! That unsuppressible panic, the panic and uneasiness of 1,000 years, surged forth like a flood bursting through a dam. Roar with a roar, the divine 9-dragon cauldron, the celestial destroying arrow, and the illusory deity position disappeared from the mind of the Central Prefecture's king. He turned around and tore the void, and the remaining half of his demon body immediately escaped into it. All he wanted now was to stay alive. Su Yu watched the Central Prefecture's king escape indifferently. He tore the void with one hand and chased after the Central Prefecture's king with the enormous mortal fairy's strength. Mo Tianxian, the sacred Kailan, Jian Wusheng, and the ghost prison's great emperor were all shocked. They looked at each other, speechless. Su Yu, who had broken through to the peak mortal fairy, was too fierce. They had expected that a peak mortal fairy would be able to kill the Central Prefecture's king with the celestial destroying arrow. Judging from the current situation, Su Yu could kill the Central Prefecture's king even without the celestial destroying arrow. Go! Let's catch up! The sacred Kailan's eyes lit up with excitement, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Little Su has given me so many surprises. I thought we were all done for. Everyone's eyes lit up. How could they miss the end of the Central Prefecture's king? With the cultivation of a peak mortal fairy, Su Yu could cross hundreds of millions of mountains and rivers with a single step. He had crossed the lower half of the central continent. This was the Heaven's Craftsman domain, one of the 5 domains under the jurisdiction of the Central Prefecture's king. Standing above the Heaven's Craftsmanship region, Su Yu's cold and disdainful eyes looked around. The boundless mortal fairy's strength surged in all directions, startling billions of creatures. With Su Yu's current cultivation, he found a mortal fairy's aura in the Heaven's Craftsmanship city at first glance. However, it was not the Central Prefecture's king. Whoosh! The next moment, Su Yu teleported above the Heavenly Craftsmanship city and said indifferently, "Come out." His voice wasn't loud, but it was like the voice of the heavens, reaching everyone's ears. However, the aura of the mortal fairy could not be hidden. Su Yu furrowed his brows and teleported to the center of the city, where a towering mountain stood. At the peak of the mountain, there was a statue of a green bull that was being worshipped. Rumor had it that he was the founder of the Heaven's Craftsman region, who had been worshipped for generations. Stop! Someone stepped forward to stop him. It was the headmaster of the Heaven's Craftsman region, an expert at the peak of all creations. Su Yu glanced at the region master, who let out a muffled groan and was pushed away by an invisible force. The region master's face was filled with shock. "You, who are you?" "Su Yu." 2 surprised voices came from the crowd. Su Yu glanced sideways at them. He had some impression of both of them. In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, he had a brief encounter with the Heaven's Craftsman faction. One of them was the eldest senior brother whose name was still unknown, and the other was a woman named Shine. Ever since the two of them had returned from the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, they had made significant improvements, especially the eldest senior brother, who was about to break through to the all-creations realm. What, Suyu? The Heaven's Craftsman Region Master was startled. He looked Suyu up and down and said while shaking his head, "No. How high is Suyu's cultivation? Moreover, he is being hunted by the Central Prefecture's king." The Heaven's Craftsman Region Master took a deep breath and bowed to Suyu. "Senior, may I ask why you have come to the Heaven's Craftsman Region?" Suyu stared at the bronze statue and said, "Nothing. I am here to find the Central Prefecture's king and save the remnant soul of your dying old ancestor." Swish. Suyu didn't do anything, but the bronze bull statue, which had been standing for countless years, cracked open all of a sudden. The Heaven's Craftsman Region Master was shocked by what he saw in the statue. In the statue, a broken demonic body was chewing the soul of a dying bronze bull in its mouth. Devouring souls to replenish primordial chi was a special method of the demons. Grandmaster. The Heaven's Knife Region Master was shocked. However, he didn't dare to approach Suyu because of the demonic power. Suyu teleported to the front of the demonic body and pointed a finger between its eyebrows. Then, he said calmly, "Do you want to hide your scent from me by using the bronze bull's scent? Central Prefecture's king, do you think you can escape?" The Central Prefecture's king changed his expression abruptly. He had to put down the bronze bull's remnant soul and block Suyu's finger with his newly recovered arm. At the same time, he tore the void with his right hand and turned around to escape. Bang! The Central Prefecture's king's arm, which had recovered with great difficulty, was smashed by Suyu's finger. Suyu looked at the dying bronze bull's remnant soul calmly. Then, he tore open the void and continued his pursuit. Old ancestor. The Heaven's Knife Region Master hurried forward and protected the remnant soul of the old ancestor with an excellent treasure. The bronze bull's remnant soul stared in the direction where Suyu had left. His eyes were full of shock and confusion. "Master, is that young man really Suyu?" Shine bit her red lips and asked anxiously. The eldest senior brother was even more worried. The Heaven's Knife Region Master said in a low voice, "No. Suyu is being hunted by the Central Prefecture's king. How could he appear here? Wait." He suddenly remembered that the peerless mortal fairy seemed to have mentioned the origin of the demonic body, the Central Prefecture's king. That demonic body is the Central Prefecture's king? How could it be? The Heaven's Knife Region Master couldn't believe the Central Prefecture's king was a demonic body. However, he was interrupted by the bronze bull's remnant soul before he could finish his words. "The Central Prefecture's king is doomed. Ahem. 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 Suyu is so strange in this world. I can't believe he hunted the Central Prefecture's king." The mountain peak fell into a dead silence. Undoubtedly, the young mortal fairy was Suyu. The bronze bull's remnant soul looked at the eldest senior brother and Shine and sighed. "You two will be expelled from the faction temporarily. You can come back when Suyu forgives you." Both of them trembled and left the mountain peak bitterly. The old ancestor didn't give their heads to Suyu. All they could do was to repair their relationship with Suyu. Another teleportation that crossed billions of mountains and rivers. When Suyu appeared again, he was in the Tianyo Prefecture. When he was hunted by the Central Prefecture's king, he expelled Suyu immediately and even wanted to capture Suyu and send him to the Central Prefecture's king. Suyu still remembered the Tianyo Prefecture's king. When Suyu appeared in the void, his perception as a peak mortal fairy swept over thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. The Central Prefecture's king had nowhere to hide. However, the Central Prefecture's king's aura was still in this city. Suyu couldn't find his exact whereabouts. Did he hide? Moreover, he needed someone to help him. Otherwise, the Central Prefecture's king's strong aura of the demon clan would be difficult to hide. King of the Tianyu Prefecture, come out! Su Yu shouted indifferently. His voice was like thunder rolling over the city. Swish! A middle-aged man in red armor appeared in surprise. When he saw the familiar young man in front of him, he couldn't help but say, Su Yu. Then, a thought appeared in his mind. If he could catch this young man, Su Yu interrupted him. Where is the Central Prefecture's king? What? The king of the Tianyu Prefecture almost thought he heard it wrong. Wasn't the Central Prefecture's king hunting him? Although the Central Prefecture's king said he was being hunted by a strong enemy, it didn't make sense that the young man who was hunted in the past would be trampled on. Could it be that he was a spy sent by that strong enemy? Thinking of this, his face became cold and a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes. Isn't the Central Prefecture's king hunting you? You should know it best. The king of the Tianyu Prefecture shook his head indifferently and stepped forward. With a wave of his hand, a stream of mortal fairies' strength surrounded Su Yu and said, By the way, you teleported to the forbidden area of the Tianyu city at will. I suspect that you have ulterior motives. I have the right to interrogate you. Su Yu was a genius with no foundation. Who would embarrass the king of the Tianyu Prefecture? Su Yu didn't move and said lightly, You really haven't seen the Central Prefecture's king? This place is so full of demonic energy. As a prefecture's king, how could you not notice? The king of the Tianyu Prefecture didn't wait for him to finish and suddenly shouted, How dare you? How dare you question me, a little subject? Sure enough, there is something wrong with you. I must interrogate you. As he raised his hand, the king of the Tianyu Prefecture rapped Su Yu with the mortal fairy's strength. However, what made him slightly surprised was that his mortal fairy's strength seemed to be wrapped around a boundless mountain, and he could not move it at all. Interrogate? Well, I really should interrogate you. How dare you cover up for the demons? Su Yu's face was cold. God Kailan's worries were not false. He had been dead for 10,000 years. The minds of the 9 prefectures' kings were unpredictable. If he believed the king of the Tianyu Prefecture rashly, the possibility of being betrayed was really high. Wow! Su Yu released the aura of the peak mortal fairy. With a wave of his sleeve, a huge stream of mortal fairies' strength trapped the king of the Tianyu Prefecture. The king of the Tianyu Prefecture finally changed his face and said in disbelief, You bang? Su Yu grabbed the king of the Tianyu Prefecture in his palm and slammed him to the ground. With a muffled sound, the body of the king of the Tianyu Prefecture was crushed directly. Even his soul suffered irreparable damage. Where is the Central Prefecture's king? Su Yu asked indifferently. The king of the Tianyu Prefecture, who originally wanted to argue, was scared out of his wits. Without saying a word, Su Yu smashed his body directly. This is too vicious. He didn't even dare to resent Su Yu. He stammered, In the secret underground room of my mansion, where the aura can be isolated. Su Yu snorted coldly and punched the mansion of the king of the Tianyu Prefecture. With a loud bang, the mansion of the king of the Tianyu Prefecture, which was protected by dozens of defensive formations, was smashed into ruins and revealed a secret underground room that was thousands of feet deep. Sure enough, in the secret room, a 1,000 feet tall demon was staring at Su Yu angrily. Do you really want to kill me? Su Yu said indifferently, You are the least qualified to say this. After saying that, he punched the Central Prefecture's king, who was escaping into the void with unparalleled golden power, smashed the body of the Central Prefecture's king, who had just recovered a little. Su Yu paused and looked at the soul of the king of the Tianyu Prefecture, who was about to escape into the void. Without looking at him, the reincarnation ripples appeared in Su Yu's eyes and directly sealed his soul into the soul space. Chapter 11:19. Half an hour later, in the Yuantian Prefecture, looking around the city, Su Yu said with a cold smile, Good. Another prefecture's king who dares to hide demons. In the next moment, a terrified soul rushed out from a certain mansion and said in fear, "Su, you destroyed my physical body. You and I are irreconcilable. You can talk big after you escape." Su Yu opened his reincarnation eyes and sealed the soul of the prefecture's king. Then, Su Yu smashed a stone pillar in the Tianyuan prefecture. The central prefecture's king, who was hiding in it, roared angrily and ran away immediately. Su Yu just left a little wound on his body to make sure that he couldn't recover completely. Half an hour later, in the Huiming prefecture, Su Yu stopped for a while and looked at the sky. At this time, the Huiming prefecture's king teleported here and looked at Su Yu in surprise. Su Yu replied with a faint smile, "Where is the central prefecture's king?" Hearing this, the Huiming prefecture's king was greatly stressed. Isn't this Su Yu who is being chased by the central prefecture's king? Why is he chasing the central prefecture's king? The most shocking thing is his strength. Without hesitation, the Huiming prefecture's king pointed to the north and said, "He came here hoping to be protected by me. However, I refused him and he fled to the North Continent." Okay. Su Yu nodded and left by tearing the void apart. Half an hour later, in the Pasua prefecture, the corners of Su Yu's mouth curled up into a cold smile again. "Very good, another one." After a while, an old woman's soul screamed and was sealed. In the lake of the Pasua prefecture, the central prefecture's king was found. At this moment, the central prefecture's king finally found Su Yu's purpose. He had the celestial destroying arrow with him, but he didn't use it to kill the central prefecture's king. Instead, he left a little wound on the central prefecture's king and kept chasing him. Moreover, he didn't warn the other prefecture's kings that the central prefecture's king was not allowed to stay here. Su Yu's purpose was to kill all the prefecture's kings who had a good relationship with the central prefecture's king and protected him even though they knew he was a demon. "You are too cruel. You're even more ruthless than me." The central prefecture's king let out the hatred from the bottom of his heart. In the past, the central prefecture's king had regarded Su Kei as an ant. But once he grasped the power, he realized that Su Kei's ruthlessness was even worse than his. Su Yu actually wanted to clean up the entire Jojo continent and eliminate the roots of the relationship network of the central prefecture's king. The three prefecture's kings, whom he had secretly befriended and intended to help him sell the Jojo continent, had all been killed by Su Yu. "Thank you for letting me win. Do you still want to continue running?" Su Yu asked calmly. The central prefecture's king's eyes almost popped out of their socket. If he didn't escape, he would die. Although escaping would implicate others, if he died a little later, he would have more hope of surviving. "If I don't die, I will make you pay 1,000 times the price." The central prefecture's king roared as he tore the void apart and continued to escape. The three prefecture's kings were already dead, and the rest were just some greedy region lords. Su Yu chased them all the way, killing without mercy, not even sparing their souls. Su Yu's bloody footprints could be found in every prefecture of the Jojo continent. For a time, the whole Jojo continent was boiling. It was rumored that Su Yu was hunting down the central prefecture's king. Anyone who was related to the central prefecture's king would be killed. With panic, the rumor spread rapidly to every corner of the Jojo continent within a whole day. Except for those who were related to the central prefecture's king, who were frightened and worried that the central prefecture's king would lead Su Yu here, the rest of the forces and martial artists knew the true identity of the central prefecture's king and his sinister intentions. There were also 3 prefectures' kings who helped the wicked and tried to sell the Jojo continent. The sacred Kailan has been dead for 10,000 years, and people's hearts are rotten. There are 3 prefectures' kings who turned to the central prefecture's king and tried to sell the Jojo continent. Good job. These vermin should all be killed. Wait, I think we should collect evidence and report the vermin that Lord Su Yu didn't find. Of course, what they were more interested in was that Su Yu was hunting down the Central Prefecture's king all over the world. He used to chase the Blood Emperor, and now he is chasing the Central Prefecture's king. Alas, we are no match for him. I just don't know how he compares with the missing destined emperor. It shouldn't be too far apart, right? If Zhan Wushuang is the destined emperor, I think Su Yu is the heaven-defying emperor. One is the son of heaven, and the other is the son of heaven. Looking back at Su Yu's development, everyone was silent. It was really difficult for him to advance from the humble bottom to where he was today. The town was in an uproar, and Su Yu's life story quickly spread, becoming a legend. Especially when he hunted down the Central Prefecture's king, people gave him the title of Silver-Haired Fairy. After 2 days, Su Yu almost killed most of the Jiuzhou continent. Today, even the Central Prefecture's king didn't know where to hide. Although there were a few survivors, they all hid early and did not dare to have any contact with him. How could he hide? As for the other prefectures' kings, if he went there, he would be immediately entangled and handed over to Su Yu. Although the world was big, there was no place for him to hide. Unable to escape, the Central Prefecture's king said in a sincere tone, "Su Yu, I can leave Jiuzhou and swear that I will never set foot in Jiuzhou again in my life. I am willing to compensate you for all your losses. How about we reconcile now?" Su Yu flicked the blood off his body and said lightly, "From the first time you attacked me, there was no possibility of reconciliation. The existence of the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron should never be known by a third person." This was Su Yu's bottom line. The Central Prefecture's king said, "As for the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron, I can also swear that I will never disclose it to another person. Do you trust a living person or a dead person?" Su Yu did not answer but asked. The Central Prefecture's king was stunned. Of course, he trusted a dead person. "Think about it carefully. If I die, you will die," the Central Prefecture's king said sternly. Su Yu said calmly, "I have thought about it very clearly. You must die." After saying that, Su Yu's right arm flashed with golden light, and he punched the Central Prefecture's king. The survivors were almost killed, and it was time to end it. However, the Central Prefecture's king refused to be killed. He tore the void apart and chose to escape. Su Yu followed him closely. When he landed on the ground, he found he was in a strange continent with an obscure aura. Everywhere was full of mist. When Su Yu looked through the mist, he found he couldn't see millions of miles away even with the strength of a peak mortal fairy. In the depths of the mist, Su Yu vaguely sensed the aura that even a peak mortal fairy would be afraid of. Is this the Far West Land? Su Yu was terrified. He was quite familiar with the forbidden area of the Jiuzhou continent. Whether it was ancient records or modern documents, they all had records of the Far West, and the evaluation of the Far West in all of these records had remained the same throughout the ages. The forbidden area of the living creatures. The portrait of Xia Jingyu, the broken horn of God Kailan, and the 5 elements flash were all excavated from the Far West Land. Nobody knew the whole picture of the Far West Land. They only knew that no one who went deep into the Far West Land could come back alive. Even the strong mortal fairies couldn't come back alive. As an ancient family, the black and white mortal fairies only dared to move in the periphery of the Far West Land for many years. Suddenly, Su Yu heard a scream. It was the Central Prefecture's king. Su Yu glanced over and saw the body of the Central Prefecture's king hidden in the mist, suddenly jumped up as if he was bitten by something. Su Yu fixed his eyes on the Central Prefecture's king and saw a python whose cultivation was comparable to a peak mortal fairy was chasing him. The python turned its head and looked at Su Yu with cold and greedy eyes. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat when he was stared at by it. This python gave Su Yu an extremely dangerous feeling, which was even more dangerous than the Central Prefecture's king. If that was the case, it would have been fine. However, Su Yu quickly discovered that there was not just one python. They swept through the mist in groups and devoured all the creatures along the way. Among them, 9 pythons found Su Yu and swam towards him as fast as lightning. Coincidentally, the Central Prefecture's king couldn't hide anymore, so he tore the space to escape. Su Yu's eyes lit up as he followed the Central Prefecture's king. Half an hour later, Su Yu appeared in the Central Prefecture. The Central Prefecture's king couldn't escape anymore, so he finally escaped back to the Central Prefecture. Standing in the ruins of the Central Prefecture city, the Central Prefecture's king stared at Su Yu, who was chasing him, and shouted coldly, "Su Yu, I ask you for the last time, are you willing to make peace with me?" "No," Su Yu said as he took out a golden arrow. Then, he put the celestial destroying arrow on the bowstring with the mortal fairy's strength in his left hand. "Give him a fatal blow and end the century-old resentment of the continent." "You. What do you want to make peace with me?" The Central Prefecture's king was extremely angry. He only mentioned reconciliation all the time, but never begged for mercy. Obviously, he was not reconciled. If there was a chance, the Central Prefecture's king would make a comeback. At that time, without the celestial destroying arrow and the bloodline of the cultivation deity, who could stop him? Seeing Su Yu's eyes were getting sharper and sharper, the Central Prefecture's king was in a panic of death. Then, he said in a low voice, "If I die, you won't have a good time. You can't see whether I have a good time or not." Su Yu was about to shoot an arrow. However, at this moment, a strand of extremely powerful mortal fairy's strength rolled over like a torrent. "All of you, stop!" The magnificent mortal fairy's strength swept over, and its main target was not the Central Prefecture's king, but Su Yu. The Central Prefecture's king rolled his eyes, and was about to take this opportunity to escape. However, as soon as he moved, Su Yu's celestial destroying arrow followed him. It seemed the Central Prefecture's king would shoot the celestial destroying arrow if he dared to move. Swish! With a loud noise, a void crack appeared behind Su Yu. Then, an old man in white walked out of it. It was the old region master of the Heavenly Knife region. However, under the realm of the mortal fairy, it could be clearly seen that there was another soul in his body, a soul of the stage 2 mortal fairy. Feeling the boundless mortal fairy's strength, Su Yu's feet shone with golden light. Then, he was instilled with the strength of the dragon. However, he didn't move a bit in the raging torrent. "Are you deaf? Do you want me to say it again? Put down the arrow. Now everyone is under my control." The old man in white, or the soul of the mortal fairy, said coldly. Su Yu said indifferently, "Who are you?" Chapter 11:20. "Humph! I am the law enforcement officer of the Great Eastern Alliance, and I am ordered to kill the demon. I will take your demon back for interrogation, and you are not allowed to shoot him." The old man's body fell down, and a soul flew out of it. It was a dark-skinned young man with gloomy eyes. He was crossing his arms in front of his chest, and saying proudly, with an arrogant look. From his eyes, Su Yu felt a deep disdain. It was a disdain that came from his bones. It was just like how a rich man from the city would feel when he came to the countryside. It was natural for him to feel condescending and disdain. Hearing this, the Central Prefecture's king was overjoyed and immediately kowtowed. "I will obey your orders, and I am willing to follow you back for investigation." The arrogant young man showed a trace of coldness and stared at Su Yu. "Do you want me to repeat it again? Put down your weapon." Su Yu slowly put down the bow and arrow in his hand and said, "What is the punishment for his crime of preparing to sell the cavern world?" "Shut up. How to enforce the law is confidential, and you can't ask." The arrogant young man raised his hand and pointed at the Central Prefecture's king. "Come here." The Central Prefecture's king was overjoyed. The so-called Alliance law enforcement officer was a special existence that maintained the order of a large area of the cavern world, and the main task was to kill the demon. However, the young man in front of him did not kill him on the spot, but chose to take him back for investigation. The Central Prefecture's king looked into the young man's eyes, and the other party quietly nodded his chin, signaling him to rest assured. In this way, the Central Prefecture's king was relieved. This law enforcement officer was probably bought by the world of the gods, and now he came to rescue him. As long as he let him go on the way back to the Alliance, the Central Prefecture's king's escape would be foolproof. As for the investigation? Humph, a cavern world without the protection of the gods, who would be willing to investigate the law enforcement officer for such a place? It should be known that those who could join the ranks of law enforcement were all elites of the Great Eastern Alliance, and these elites were mostly from the families of the gods. Although they were not necessarily descendants of the gods, who dared to offend the elites cultivated by such a huge family. Thinking of this, the Central Prefecture's king sneered and walked past Suyu. At the moment when he passed by, he laughed. Suyu, the waters of Jojo are deep. You an ant can't make a big wave. Ah! Like a winner, the Central Prefecture's king walked toward the law enforcer. However, he had only taken a few steps when he felt a chill on his back. Immediately after, his body felt as if it was being incinerated, and then his soul was being torn apart. He looked down at his chest, where a golden arrow had pierced through his chest. The sharp arrow contained an astonishing power that was wreaking havoc within his body, rapidly destroying his physical body and even his soul. His pupils gradually dilated, and he turned his head to look. Suyu was slowly putting away the bow in his hand. The celestial destroying arrow had disappeared. You dare to kill me! The Central Prefecture's king never expected that Suyu would dare to kill him in front of the law enforcers. As his vision gradually blurred, the Central Prefecture's king was furious. He was about to escape, but Suyu, her resentment and hatred turned into a malicious curse. Suyu, I curse you to die a horrible death. The land of divine will never forgive you. My father and mother will never forgive you. Heavenly demon curse! At the last moment, the Central Prefecture's king opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, which was full of the power of the demon god. It condensed into a mark of a demon's head and teleported to Suyu's chest. Suyu couldn't avoid it and was branded on his chest by the mark. Suyu had no time to check it. With a flash of cold light, his fists flashed with golden light, and the Central Prefecture's king was completely killed. Even his soul was destroyed together. In a dark hall, 1,000 feet tall demonic shadow in an ancient red robe suddenly showed a shocked expression, followed by anger, and then a ferocious expression. Who killed my son? Who? In the roar, the divine power ran through the years and the stars, traversing the gloomy cavern world. In a bright and peaceful world, a beautiful woman suddenly covered her chest, and her eyes were full of sadness and anger. My son is dead? Obviously, the law enforcers were sent to rescue him. Why is he still dead? Who did it? Suyu didn't stop after killing the Central Prefecture's king. He grabbed with one hand and blasted open the space where the Central Prefecture's king's treasures were stored. All the treasures in it were burned by Suyu, leaving no trace of their aura. He erased everything that the Central Prefecture's king had left in the world to prevent him from being resurrected. If Suyu knew that in this world, apart from Suyu, even the gods did not have the ability to resurrect another creature, he would not be so careful. The law enforcers, who were close at hand, did not expect that someone dared to kill the Central Prefecture's king in front of him. However, when he reacted, Suyu had already destroyed his body and soul, leaving not even a trace of his soul. You are courting death. The law enforcer roared, almost furious, and attacked with his soul body. Kneel down. He was really shocked and angry. This task was personally ordered by the young master of the clan, but it was ruined. What kind of punishment would he receive when he returned? If he did not capture Suyu and take him back, he shuddered at the thought of the young master's character. Get lost. Suyu answered him with a slap. Puff. Even if the law enforcers were in their heyday, they were no match for the peak mortal fairy, let alone a mere soul. They relied on their identity as law enforcers, and in the other cavern worlds, they were naturally afraid of everyone. However, in the Jojo cavern world, the gods had fallen for nearly 10,000 years, and no one had taught the creatures of Jojo about the outside world. What the law enforcers were, what the Great Eastern Alliance was completely blank. Under such circumstances, a mere stage 2 mortal fairy was acting like a tyrant in front of a peak mortal fairy. It would be strange if he was not injured. You dare to hurt me? The law enforcer was furious. Suyu stared at him coldly. Where you are from, what your identity is, I don't care, but this demon tried to sell Jojo, and killing him is the internal affairs of Jojo. You did not attack the demon clan, but took me as your enemy. When I killed him, you then killed me. Humph, now I want to know whether you are a law enforcer or sent by the demon clan. Suyu walked towards the law enforcer. The law enforcer was ashamed and angry. As a law enforcer, except for the gods, who was not afraid of him. As a law enforcer, I have supreme privileges. You are just an ant in the mortal world. What qualifications do you have to question me? The law enforcer stood up and said coldly, I'd better teach you what a law enforcer is first, ignorant savage. Slap. As soon as the voice fell, Suyu's figure, like the wind, teleported over, raised his hand, and slapped the face of the law enforcer, slapping him to the ground. Well, this is the law enforcer, ignorant and fearless. Suyu stepped on his chest, making him unable to move, and interrogated. Tell me, what is your relationship with the Central Prefecture's king? I don't believe that you came so coincidentally and appeared at such a suitable time. You didn't appear earlier or later, but when he was about to be killed, you took him back. The law enforcer almost went berserk. He wanted to popularize the concept of law enforcers, but what he got was a rough slap in the face. Because of anger, his eyes were bloodshot, and he gritted his teeth, saying one word at a time with hatred. I will never, dong. This time, a foot stepped on his face, and half of his face was stepped into the ground. You haven't figured out the situation. Do you think I won't kill you? Suyu said lightly. This sentence finally made the law enforcer tremble. He vaguely remembered that many years ago, when a law enforcer was enforcing the law in a deserted cavern world, he was killed by the ignorant savage inside. Thinking of this, the law enforcer broke out in a cold sweat. Accustomed to showing off in front of people, the law enforcer woke up from a dream, and his heart was filled with uneasiness. But for him to surrender to a savage was simply wishful thinking. Humph, you wait, I will never let you go. The law enforcer shouted coldly, and crushed a fiery red jade pendant at his waist. The jade pendant suddenly shattered, and a majestic power of space transmission gushed out, wrapping the body of the law enforcer. What he wanted to do was to send the news back to the family as soon as possible and let the young master know. As for how to deal with the savage in front of him, with the temperament of the young master, the law enforcer couldn't help but feel a touch of pleasure. If he fell into the hands of the young master, he would hate himself for being born in this world. However, Suyu sneered, it seems that you care about something, but do you think you can escape? A pair of eyes filled with reincarnation ripples looked into the eyes of the law enforcer. Suddenly, before the space transmission, the law enforcer was drawn into the soul space. At this moment, God Kylan, Mo Tianxian, and the others who were chasing and watching also arrived at the final battlefield. There was no trace of the Central Prefecture's king. Is he dead? God Kylan tried to ask. Suyu nodded, yes, he is dead. Hearing this, although everyone already knew the result, they still couldn't help but feel excited. At the same time, a deep sense of exhaustion hit them. After 100 years of dormancy, they finally completed the great cause and killed the Central Prefecture's king. Day and night, after so much effort, they finally succeeded. Moreover, Suyu was extremely ruthless. He uprooted the Central Prefecture's king's accomplices one by one, cleaned up the filth, and returned peace and tranquility to Jojo. Only Suyu knew that Jojo would not be peaceful. The Central Prefecture's king was not the only one who was watching Jojo. Seniors, you should all take a rest. Suyu looked at the crowd. Those who were seriously injured and had lost their bodies didn't have time to rest. God Kylan smacked his lips. Yes, all of you go. You have worked hard in the past 100 years. The ghost prison's great emperor paused, and finally, he still wanted to say something. Then, he went aside to repair his body on the spot. Jian Wuxing supported Mo Tianxian, who was seriously injured, to repair her body and help Mo Tianxian heal her wounds. Brother Suyu, I will wait for you. Qin Xianer stepped aside obediently. Her two bright big eyes were looking at Suyu, and her heart was full of sweetness and pride. When the others left, Suyu said, Do you have something to say to me? God Kylan changed his cynical attitude and nodded. Yes, I have an important thing to discuss with you. Say it, Suyu said as he looked at his body. The realm of the peak mortal fairy was showing signs of decline. Chapter 11:21. However, after experiencing the law enforcers, Suyu wasn't surprised. Since you know you can't keep it, why did you destroy the Central Prefecture's king for hundreds of years? Suyu asked. God Kylan must have a plan. God Kylan sighed. The value of a cavern world depends on its prosperity. For a deity, a prosperous cavern world is equivalent to an abundance of celestial energy sphere. Refining the whole cavern world can get the celestial energy sphere of the whole cavern world. Suyu already knew that the so-called cavern world, including the creatures, plants, and even the mountains and rivers, were created by the deities who created the world with the celestial energy sphere. If the whole cavern world was refined, theoretically, one could get the celestial energy sphere of the creation deity. The more prosperous the cavern world was, the more abundant the celestial energy sphere was, so it was more valuable. Since my death 10,000 years ago, I have been secretly transferring the celestial energy sphere of Jojo to the other 99 small cavern worlds that I created when I was alive, God Kylan said. Suyu's heart skipped a beat, and he took out the martial tower from his arms. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turns out that I've been running around the continent with 100 cavern worlds. He remembered that the 100th story of the martial tower was a small cavern world equivalent to the Zhenlong continent. So, apart from the first story, the rest of the 98 stories should be the same. Yes, they were transferred to the world of the martial tower. God Kylan opened his mouth. He felt that nothing could be hidden from Suyu. He wanted to say something, but he was used to Suyu's ability to guess. He continued, but the way they were transferred was very gentle and slow. Suyu thought about it and suddenly remembered that God Kylan had said that killing the geniuses in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion was for their own good. The glittering jewel mortal fairy also confirmed this. In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, the challengers who were killed were transferred to the world of the martial tower, right? Suyu said with a wry smile. God Kylan was a little angry. You have guessed everything. Can't I regain some sense of superiority? After pausing for a moment, the Qilin rolled his eyes and said, That's right. All the challengers who died in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion were transferred to the martial tower. The humans you saw on the 100th level were the descendants of the earliest batch of challengers from Jojo. They have already reproduced in that world and are living in peace. It's just that this method is too slow. Only 9,000 of the continent's most outstanding trial takers can be transferred every 100 years. However, if they were too hasty and moved all the living creatures and all the mountains and rivers, it would definitely lead to the action of the covetous people outside, and the Central Prefecture's king was one of them. He noticed that the vitality of the 9 regions was constantly weakening, so he speculated that I was the one behind it. Therefore, he hurriedly came to the 9 regions in an attempt to sell it as soon as possible. Speaking of this, the sacred Kylan sighed deeply. I can feel that as the time of my death grows longer and longer, the old friends of the past will fade away, and more people begin to covet Jojo. In the future, there will be more and more central prefectures kings coming. One day, we won't be able to defend it. Therefore, I want to catch all the covetous people off guard and empty the entire Jojo continent. So, the premise is to eliminate the central prefectures king, so it is convenient to take action? Su Yu continued his words and revealed the meaning of the sacred Kylan's 100 years of dormancy. God Kylan said, "That's right. If he is still here, sudden action will definitely lead to his retaliation, and the news will definitely be leaked. At that time, in a hurry, the covetous people will swarm in, and you and I will not be able to stop them." Now, the central prefecture's king has been killed. While the news of his death has not spread to the cavern world, immediately move the entire Jojo continent. Then, you escape with the martial arts tower and let those covetous people get an empty shell, the sacred Kylan said. Su Yu was shocked. Moving the entire continent? Can the world of the martial arts tower accommodate it? No problem, the 100th layer is just the smallest world, and the lower it is, the bigger it is. Moreover, I intend to open up all the 99 layers of the world to form a bigger world than the cavern world of Jojo, which is enough to accommodate the creatures of Jojo, the sacred Kylan said. Of course, Su Yu agreed with this suggestion. He and the Zhenlong creatures had already taken root in Jojo. How could he tolerate them being refined into a celestial energy sphere and absorbed by a deity? However, there are two problems. The sacred Kylan frowned. Chapter 11:22. Brother Su Yu, you don't need to worry. Before she left, Sister Jingyu said that she had calculated her own path, and that we might meet again in an unexpected place. Moreover, the life jade plate she left behind is still intact, Qin Xianer said. Su Yu was surprised by this. Where did Jingyu go? Why did she leave? Qin Xianer paused for a moment, then said hesitantly, Sister Jingyu said that your relationship tribulation would fall on her, and that if she didn't leave, you would surely die. So, she left alone to find a way to resolve your relationship tribulation. Her relationship tribulation would fall on her? Su Yu was quite surprised. He had assumed that it would be Xianer, but who would have thought that it would be Jingyu? Su Yu was quite worried. Fortunately, her life jade plate was still intact, which meant that her guess half a year ago was correct. Xianer, Su Yu looked at Xianer, who was standing in front of him. He didn't have any more doubts in his heart, so he said what he wanted to say. However, Xianer's slender fingers touched Su Yu's lips, while her face became flushed. Don't say it. I wasn't asleep at that time, so I heard everything you said. Ah? Su Yu was startled by her words. Xianer, you were very happy. Qin Xianer mustered her courage, raised her face, and looked deeply into Su Yu's eyes. I've always felt sorry for you and Sister Jingyu. I knew that you loved each other, but I pretended not to know it. I selfishly took Sister Jingyu's place and became your wife. I'm really selfish. She then added, I'm already satisfied that Sister Jingyu has forgiven me, and I don't dare to ask for more. But, Brother Su Yu, what you said to me while I was asleep made me happy, but also scared. Do you really think that a selfish girl like me is worthy of your love? Su Yu was startled, and as he looked at the tearful Xianer, he embraced her and said softly, Silly girl, have I ever lied to you? Xianer wiped her tears, then lowered her head and said, I'm not as pretty as Sister Jingyu, nor am I as gentle as her. I'm not as helpful as her. Brother Su Yu, do you really love me, or are you just trying to comfort me? It turned out that she had always had an inferiority complex in her heart. Ever since they first met, Xia Jingyu was like a precious jade that emitted an otherworldly aura in the mortal world. She was like a crane in a flock of chickens, and no woman could compare to her. It was the same now. But there's something about you that's on par with her. Su Yu wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Qin Xianer raised her head. What is it? It's a kind gesture. Suyu tapped her chest and smiled gently. Qin Xian'er's tears turned into a smile, and she revealed a satisfied smile. She then buried herself in Suyu's embrace and blushed as she said, "Brother Suyu, you touched me there." Only then did Suyu realize that he was touching a well-developed softness. After resting for half a day, Suyu's soul entered the 9-jade spiritual pearl. Xingge was lying beside the field, shaking a colorful butterfly in boredom. Suyu was slightly surprised. When had he ever attracted butterflies? "Ah, master is here." Xingge jumped up, her face full of joy. The colorful butterfly landed on Xingge's shoulder intimately, as if it liked her very much. As for Suyu, he was now more vigilant towards him. "What is this?" Suyu asked as he looked at the butterfly. Xingge said happily, "Congratulations, master. The 5-colored chaos butterfly has broken out of its cocoon and transformed into a butterfly." Suyu was taken aback and could not help but look over. This was an extinct ancient spiritual worm that was difficult to find even in the Xing River, the 5-colored chaos butterfly. It was first discovered in the seed of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, and later began to spit out a strand of silk. That silk was extremely helpful to Suyu. After not seeing it for so long, it had actually transformed from a caterpillar into a butterfly. During the transformation, it was always Xingge who accompanied it, so of course it was closer to Xingge. "Master, it's very powerful. It says it can eat anything," Xingge chirped. When Suyu heard that, he immediately looked at the nursery, and his face darkened. It really could eat anything. Many of the geniuses and earthly guardians transplanted in the nursery were thousands of years old, and all of them were eaten up. Even the incredible feather spiritual pomegranate tree, which was at least 10,000 years old, was eaten up by the 5-colored chaos butterfly. The entire nursery was ruined to the point that it was too horrible to look at. The only thing to be thankful for was that the heavenly orchid silver bamboo was still there. After such a long period of cultivation, it was already 700 or 800 years old. Xingge stuck out her tongue. "The last time you called me out, it was like this when I came back. It wanted to eat the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, but I stopped it. I could only feed it something else, but in the valley, it seemed that this was all that was edible." The blue veins on Suyu's forehead throbbed. He stared at the 5-colored chaos butterfly and said with dissatisfaction, "Where is your dignity as a mutant chaos butterfly? How did you mutate into a foodie?" It was no wonder that Suyu was angry. Although most of the transplanted things in the nursery were useless, some of them were precious spiritual things transplanted from the glittering jewel wonderland. Suyu was going to cultivate them to be more than 1,000 years old, but he didn't expect that they would all be eaten up. Unexpectedly, the lazy fat worm had now become a butterfly, and its spiritual wisdom had increased greatly. It understood Suyu's words and flapped its wings angrily at Suyu. Suyu smiled at his protest. However, his expression changed abruptly in the next moment. His physical body, which was in the state of the peak mortal fairy, was torn apart and was about to be destroyed. This was no small matter. Xingge also noticed the abnormality and hurriedly stopped it. "Stop, what are you doing? How can you attack the master?" The chaos multicolored butterfly unwillingly folded its beautiful wings and stared at Suyu arrogantly. Suyu was shocked and used the Heart of Eternity to restore his physical body. When he stared at the chaos butterfly again, Suyu's heart was filled with indescribable shock. The flapping of its wings could destroy the physical body of the peak mortal fairy? If it flapped with all its strength, wouldn't it destroy the soul? Xingge was shocked and apologized nervously. "Master, it's my fault, please punish me." Suyu was full of smiles and waved his hand. "Ha ha ha, what's wrong? Take good care of the chaos butterfly, and it will be a great achievement." After thinking about it, Suyu activated the mortal fairy's strength and sealed it into the top of Xingge's head. This mortal fairy's strength should be enough for you to break through the all-creations realm. Hearing this, Shunga was overjoyed. The full mortal fairy's strength of the peak mortal fairy was more than enough to break through the all creation's realm. She could even fight for the all creation's peak. As for the chaos butterfly, since it's close to you, take good care of it, Suyu said. Shunga rolled her eyes and said, Master, the chaos butterfly said that it can only release energy once after swallowing it. That blow just now was the result of swallowing all the spiritual treasures of the world. Is that so? Suyu was not too surprised. Such incredible power was not groundless. The power of swallowing the treasures of the world and transforming it into offensive power made sense. Well, I will let you enter the glittering jewel wonderland. You can pick any spiritual treasures of the world and transplant them into the nursery. From now on, the task of feeding the chaos butterfly will be handed over to you. Hearing this, Shunga was overjoyed. Next, Suyu changed the layout of the 9-jade spiritual pearl with his mind. The supreme growing soil and the cottage with the remnant soul of the 9-tailed white fox were all isolated into another small enclosed space. Only the remaining space could accommodate the rest of the people. There were still 6 days, enough time to settle them down. His soul returned to his body. Suyu looked at the ghost prison's great emperor, who was frowning not far away. He walked over and said, I have a question. Can you answer it? The ghost prison's great emperor was shocked. He had already known about God Kylan's arrangement. The one who got the ticket was Suyu, and whether he could leave or not depended on Suyu. Brother Su, please speak. The ghost prison's great emperor was completely on equal footing. Suyu said, Can you tell me why you insist on helping the central prefecture? As a ghost, the ghost prison's great emperor's previous performance was even more desperate than the people of Jiuzhou. The ghost prison's great emperor laughed bitterly. Because I have no way out. The deity of the world of ghosts and souls is my father. He has 3 sons, and I rank last. The 3 of us are being tempered by our father. Whoever succeeds will receive his help and become the new generation of ghost deities. Unfortunately, I am the most stupid and can't compare with my eldest brother and second brother. Seeing that they are gradually gaining my father's favor, I have to choose the most difficult task to support Jiuzhou. My father also agreed because the ghost god and God Kylan are old friends. However, the situation of Jiuzhou is much more complicated than I thought. In Jiuzhou, I did not play much role. I am afraid that I will not be appreciated by my father when I go back this time. This is somewhat similar to the mortals fighting for the throne, isn't it? Why do you insist on letting your father assist you instead of working hard to become a god yourself? In Suyu's view, the ghost prison's great emperor has the blood of the gods. Compared to ordinary mortals, it can be said that the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Why does he insist on doing this? The ghost prison's great emperor was stunned and thought to himself, is it easy to become a god? Even with the full help of the ghost god, it is not necessarily possible to break through the position of the gods, let alone the most difficult to become a god alone? However, in the face of Suyu in front of him, he could not say it. Suyu started from an ordinary person and walked step by step to where he is today. It may not be easy to become a god. After a long time of contemplation, the ghost prison's great emperor's thoughts were clear. If he goes back now, he will not be able to get the favor of the ghost god. It is better to go out alone. Suyu can make his current status, why can't he? Thank you for your advice, Brother Su. If Brother Su is willing to take me all the way, I will be grateful. Suyu smiled. Ghost brother, you don't have to be so polite. You have dedicated 100 years to Jiuzhou. It is natural to take you away from Jiuzhou. He knows nothing about the outside world. If there is a son of the ghost god accompanying him all the way, there are many benefits. With this in mind, Suyu dealt with the ghost race and came to the 2 dust fairies. 2 seniors. Suyu wanted to salute but was stopped by the 2 dust fairies. Chapter 11:23. Su Yu did not put on any pretense, and simply asked, "May I ask how many members of the great Oriental family are left?" The black dust immortal's face showed a sad expression. "There are only a few thousand people left." Although tens of thousands of people had used the transmission array to escape, over half of them had perished because the array formation had drawn out too much of their power of demon gods. In the end, only a few thousand remained. "Don't worry, two elders. Please gather the remaining members of the clan and prepare to leave the 9 provinces cavern with me in a few days. I believe that if the distance is too far, the effect of the curse will weaken accordingly. Quietly multiply, and we should be able to restore the Dongfang family to its peak." The 2 elders were pleasantly surprised. Su Yu was willing to bring them along. This great kindness, how can my Dongfang family ever repay it? White Dust Fairy looked at the shy and silent Dongfang Yu behind her, but secretly sighed. If she had married Su Yu before, it would have been possible. Now, how could Yuer be worthy of him? The other party had a wife by his side, so it was even more impossible. Suddenly, the White Dust Immortal glanced at the 5 Elements mountain behind them, and the Black Dust Immortal also noticed it. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded slightly. They had studied this mountain for many years, yet they had never ventured deep into its belly. Moreover, the power of 5 elements was not very useful to them. On the other hand, Su Yu's training in the belly of the mountain seemed to be beneficial to him. The 2 of them discussed and decided that it was the most suitable gift. Su Yu, the great Oriental family, is not fated to have the 5 elements mountain. It is beneficial to your training. On behalf of the great Oriental family, this mountain is a gift to you. I hope you won't reject it. Of course, Su Yu would not decline. The 5 Elements mountain was useless to them, but it was a treasure to Su Yu. After pretending to be modest, Su Yu obtained the 5 Elements mountain happily. Although the mountain couldn't be shrunk, it could be stored in the 9 Jade Spiritual Pearl, which would save him a lot of trouble. Seeing Su Yu put away the mountain, the Black and White Dust Fairies were taken aback. This mountain couldn't be contained in any space, not even the space created by the Dust Fairies. This kid even has a portable cavern world. What other treasures can catch his eye? I guess he accepted our 5 Elements mountain reluctantly, didn't he? Thinking of Su Yu's several refusals, they couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that Su Yu was really declining the offer. The Dongfang family had settled down. Next, only the Duanxian Cliffmaster and the ancient Bronze Tree Man were left. After thinking about it, Su Yu used the Divine Level Transportation Portal and arrived at the extreme north. On a cliff that pierced through the clouds, Su Yu saw the Duanxian Cliffmaster, who was recuperating from his injuries. "I didn't expect you to actually succeed. It seems like I didn't make a loss this time." The Severed Fairy Cliff Master laughed. Su Yu had obviously come to fulfill his promise. In terms of who helped him the most during the tribulation of man, the Duanxian Cliffmaster would be the first. If it weren't for this King of Darkness, who had entangled the Central Prefecture's king for 5 whole days, history would have been rewritten. In 6 days, come to the ruins of Central Continent City and board a ship to leave. Hearing this, the Duanxian Cliff Master looked excited and sighed. "I can finally leave the Jiuzhou Cavern." Su Yu caught a glimpse of a tinge of hatred flashing through his eyes. It seemed that the Severed Fairy Cliff Master's visit to the 9 states was not that simple. "Okay, then I'll take my leave," Su Yu said. The Duanxian Cliff Master stopped him and said, "Wait, I have brought Wu Xie back. Do you want to see her? Little devil?" Su Yu smiled gently. "Has she been brought back from the desolate, evil jungle? You're not cursing me, are you?" He had left the little devil in the desolate, evil jungle and said that he would pick her up after finishing his business. Who knew that things would develop to this point? He had almost forgotten about her. With this little lady's temper, she was probably grinding her teeth in hatred. My daughter just carved a sign with your name on it and then prayed every day, it was praying." The Duanxian Cliff Master forced a smile. The corner of Su Yu's mouth twitched. Is that a memorial tablet? She's cursing me, isn't she? Amused, Su Yu thought for a moment and took out the glittering jewel fairy scepter. It was covered with cracks and could only be used once more. This is the glittering jewel fairy scepter that I promised to get for Wu Xie. I hope it can help her resolve the effects of the spirit grass of immortality. The Duanxian Cliff Master's eyes lit up and he accepted it with relief. Thank you, Mr. Su, I hope it will be effective on my daughter. In fact, he knew that to resolve the effects of the spirit grass of immortality was not something that this fairy artifact could do. However, it might not be completely ineffective, and he could still give it a try. I'll take my leave then. Su Yu tore the void apart and left. The next moment, Su Yu arrived at the desolate, evil jungle and appeared directly in the depths of the valley. Imu rushed over immediately. He was worried that an enemy had invaded. When he saw that it was Su Yu, he couldn't help but say, "You've reached the peak of the mortal fairy in such a short time. Unbelievable, unbelievable!" He had a stupefied look on his face, trying hard to put on a surprised expression. It was extremely comical. The desolate, evil jungle was isolated from the outside world. He had no idea what had happened in the outside world these days. I want to see the tree goddess. I don't know if I can help her with my current cultivation, Su Yu said. Back then, he was just a small fairy. Now that he was a peak mortal fairy, he didn't know if he could shake the spear that was condensed from evil fatal energy. Inmu nodded cheerfully. Once again, he arrived at the underground magma. A small golden tree was growing in the magma. Su Yu's arrival immediately awakened the remnant soul of the tree goddess on the small tree. However, based on Su Yu's current knowledge, it should be called a trace of godly spirit left behind by the tree goddess. Activate the divine realm, Su Yu said. A pair of eyes opened on the small tree. When he saw that it was Su Yu, a look of delight appeared on his face. Has it been hundreds of years or thousands of years? You've already reached this level of cultivation? He, who was in a deep sleep, didn't know how much time had passed. Su Yu smiled bitterly and remained silent. When the divine realm was activated, he entered it immediately. It was just like what he had seen in the past. A beautiful young lady, whose exquisite body was covered with a thin layer of emerald green gauze, was sitting on the throne, sleeping peacefully and sweetly. A long spear that was densely covered with evil fatal energy was pierced through its abdomen. With his current vision, Su Yu could clearly sense that the tree goddess's body was densely covered with this kind of evil fatal energy. Fortunately, the godly spirit in the tree goddess's body was continuously producing divine energy, which kept the evil fatal energy at bay. This evil fatal energy belonged to the power of a deity. The Milky Way star sand didn't have an artifact spirit, so it could only exert 1/10 of its power. Hence, it couldn't absorb the evil fatal energy. Su Yu could only rely on external force to forcibly remove the long spear. Su Yu walked forward and grasped the long spear. The evil fatal energy on the long spear tumbled all of a sudden and surged into Su Yu's body. Su Yu didn't dare to be careless. He condensed the mortal fairy's strength to defend himself. He managed to block the evil fatal energy, but he couldn't block it for too long. Holding the long spear tightly, Su Yu exerted strength in his 5 fingers and suddenly pulled it out. Puff! With a dull sound, the long spear was pulled out by force. Only a part of the long spear that was supposed to pierce through the tree goddess's body was still inserted into its abdomen. The godly spirit of the tree goddess, who was on the side, was pleasantly surprised. It's out! It's out! Su Yu was speechless for a while. This was not the birth of a child. However, when Su Yu tried to pull it out again, the long spear didn't move at all. It was difficult to pull it out again. Young man, long time no see. Suddenly, a wisp of faint voice came from the girl's body. She was still sleeping, but her voice could be heard. The tree goddess had woken up. Compared with the previous intermittent time, This time the tree goddess's speech was very smooth. It could be seen that her consciousness had been completely awakened. Finally, the eyes that had been closed for many years slowly opened after a slight tremble. It was a pair of beautiful emerald eyes, shining with bright brilliance. With a fresh and bright face, it gave people an indescribable breath of life. Just by looking at those eyes, people felt that the haze in their hearts was gone. Suyu knew that this was the breath of the divine path inadvertently released by the gods, which was extremely easy to affect the perception of others. Immediately, he protected his body with the strength of the mortal fairy. "I finally see you, young man," the girl said slowly. Her voice was pleasant to the ear, like a string of bamboo. She opened her bright eyes and looked at Suyu with a gentle smile on her lips. "So this is what you look like. The last time my consciousness was temporarily awakened, I couldn't perceive the specific situation of the outside world. So after sleeping, I have been thinking about what kind of person you are, what race you are, and what you look like." Suyu did not dare to look directly into her eyes. He said lightly, "I have let the tree goddess down. No, in the eyes of a god, your appearance is very beautiful, and I like it very much." The tree goddess was generous with her praise. Suyu was a little embarrassed. This tree goddess was quite straightforward. After thinking for a while, he said, "The continent is moving, and the Jojo cavern world is about to become desolate. I am here to inform you in advance. 6 days later, I will take you and your people to board the ship, enter the Xing River world, and leave this place. Well, if you are willing to leave." The tree goddess rubbed her temples with her white fingers and said, "I see. When I was sleeping, I felt that someone had touched the veins of the Jojo continent. Turns out that the whole continent is going to be moved. So, I will be homeless?" When she spoke, a pair of beautiful emerald eyes were staring at Suyu. To be honest, the last thing Suyu wanted was to bring the tree goddess into the 9-jade spiritual pearl. With the perception of the tree goddess, he was afraid that the supreme growing soil could not be hidden from her. As a wood deity, the supreme growing soil was an irresistible temptation. Maybe she would do something, and it was completely possible that she would take the 9-jade spiritual pearl for herself. As a deity, she should not be so shameless, right? Moreover, the long halberd in her abdomen had not been taken out, so she should not dare to be too unscrupulous. "I have a small cavern world. I don't know if the tree goddess and my people are willing to accommodate me." "I am willing to," the tree goddess said without hesitation. She said with a smile, "I am willing to go anywhere you want me to go." Looking at the tree goddess, who did not know how to be modest and polite, Suyu withdrew the polite words that were on the tip of his tongue. Intuition told Suyu that this tree goddess had a temperament that did not match her temperament. "Okay, but my cavern world is relatively small. I am afraid it cannot accommodate so many people, and it cannot accommodate the body of the tree goddess." "It doesn't matter." The tree goddess waved her small hand. If she was not nailed to the throne, she would have stood up and said, "We are so familiar with each other. Just leave the trivial matters to me. Wait for me for a while." Chapter 11:24. Looking at the goddess who was busy casting spells, Suyu was speechless. What happened to her demeanor as a goddess? What happened to her elegance? What happened to her freshness as a tree? What happened to the bold and unrestrained tree goddess? Suyu felt that the beautiful illusion in his mind of the tree goddess's elegance and gentleness had disappeared in an instant. "Oh, young man, it's done." The tree goddess made a few simple signs and said with a smile, "So fast?" Suyu sensed outside the divine land and his mouth twitched. There was no underground lava outside. Where were the ancient bronze tree men? Not to mention a tree, even the ground was scraped away, leaving behind a huge pit that was thousands of feet deep. The body of the ancient bronze tree goddess, the boundless giant tree whose roots covered the bottom of the continent, had also disappeared. The former desolate evil jungle only had a small golden tree left, floating in the void. "Where are they?" Suyu asked in surprise. The girl blinked her eyes and said, "Of course, I took back my cavern world. Otherwise, what would I do?" Suyu did not know where to start. "Okay, take me away quickly." The tree goddess did not have the awareness of a guest living under someone else's roof. Instead, she was like a proud pet, urging Suyu to take her home quickly. Suyu was confused. He left the divine land and put the small golden tree floating in the air into the 9 jade spiritual pearl. As soon as he put it in, Suyu's soul, which was attached to the 9 jade spiritual pearl, was shocked by a surprised scream. "Ah! So much supreme growing soil. Ha ha, I'm rich. This is my home from now on. I will fight whoever drives me away." Wow! The 5-colored chaos butterfly. It looks valuable. How about making it into a specimen? Hey, the ghost girl over there, give me some tea. What? You dare to refuse? Don't go. Do you think I can't stand up? Humph. Hearing the chaos in the 9 jade spiritual pearl, Suyu's face darkened. Which bandit nest did this mountain king come from? Just as Suyu was about to return to the central prefecture, the tree goddess's voice rang in his ears. "Young man, you should be careful of the curse mark on your body." Suyu's heart skipped a beat. Before the death of the central prefecture's king, he condensed a curse with the power of gods and demons and branded it on Suyu's chest. Because it was godfiend power, the Milky Way star sand was unable to remove it. The source of the demon god's power seems to be an extraordinary demon god. If he instructs this imprint to find you, you will die very quickly. The tree goddess teased. Suyu asked, "Isn't this curse meant to harm my body?" "Of course not. This is a mark forged with the power of a demon god. As long as you appear within a certain range of that demon god, he will definitely be able to sense your existence." Suyu's heart shuddered, and he asked in a deep voice, "How far away can I sense this mark?" "Not far, maybe half of the galaxy. Unfortunately, you are within his sensing range." The tree goddess gloated. "I think he is already on his way." "What?" Suyu's expression turned serious at once. "But don't worry, I've already sealed your imprint. Unless we meet face to face, I won't be able to sense you," the tree goddess added. Suyu glanced at the imprint with his transparent eyes. As expected, he found that the mark without the mark of the demon god's head was covered by a golden leaf. "When did she do that? I didn't sense it at all." Suyu couldn't help but be surprised. Even a peak mortal fairy was like a baby in front of a deity, even a deity who couldn't even stand up. "Well, the muscles on your chest are quite strong, but I don't know if your lower body is also strong," a teasing voice came. Suyu's face turned red and he gritted his teeth. "You are a scum among people, among trees." What answered him was a string of silvery laughter. Suyu returned to the central prefecture in a depressed mood. He re-examined the current situation. The old man of the central prefecture's king, a deity who was evaluated as not good by another deity, had already targeted him. Although he had the cover of the tree goddess, oh, the female scum, he was still in great danger. On the way back, Suyu's cultivation finally slipped down from the peak mortal fairy realm, and it continued to fall at a faster speed. Eventually, his cultivation would slip back to the original level of a stage 9 fairy. Apart from that, there was nothing serious. All he had to do was wait for 6 days, when the continent would migrate, and then he would board the ship and leave. What Suyu didn't know was that his unexpected action had caused a great disturbance in the Milky Way. In the vast and dark Milky Way, countless wild beasts wandered, devouring all the creatures that walked out of the cavern world along the way. Outside the Jojo cavern world, a fiery red boat was floating quietly. There were 2 people on the boat. One of them was a young man who crossed the border with the proud law enforcer to enter Jojo. He was fair-skinned and gentle. At this moment, he was sitting in the boat with a sad face, looking down at the body of the proud young man under his feet. His soul was gone, and only an empty body was left. Meng Ku, did you meet any powerful people in the Jojo Cavern world? A middle-aged man in a linen robe was sitting opposite him. His cultivation had reached the terrifying stage 4 mortal fairy. Meng Ku said, Captain, I received your order to return immediately. Then, I grabbed the soul of the demonic god of withered bones and teleported back to the boat. I didn't specifically investigate the powerhouses in the Jojo Cavern world. However, during the capture process, I did sense the existence of several mortal fairies, and the strongest one was only at the stage 2 mortal fairy. The middle-aged man in linen shook his head calmly. Impossible. Even if he was besieged by many strong stage 2 mortal fairies, Qin Kuo's soul couldn't have escaped. In the Jojo Cavern world, there must be peerless powerhouses who are no weaker than me. Meng Ku said in surprise, How do you know? In the Jojo Cavern world, the deities have been dead for tens of thousands of years, and the creatures in it live and die on their own. Theoretically, they should be getting weaker and weaker. How could there be someone who is no weaker than you? The middle-aged man in linen sighed. When you were carrying out the task across the border, I sensed the fluctuation of 2 peak mortal fairies. Although it was very weak, because of the isolation of the cavern world, I can't be wrong. Even Qin Kuo's soul couldn't escape. Most likely, he was killed by the 2 peak mortal fairies. Hiss! How could there be a peak mortal fairy in this decaying cavern world? Meng Ku took a breath. He felt lucky that he kept a low profile when he was in the Jojo Cavern world. Otherwise, he would have provoked 2 peak mortal fairies. Qin Kuo was a good example. The middle-aged man in linen glanced at the dark Milky Way coldly and sneered. Otherwise, why do you think there were dozens of ships hidden nearby when we came here, but only a few are left now? They were all scared away by the fluctuation of the 2 peak mortal fairies. This was also the reason why the middle-aged man in linen sent an urgent message to ask Meng Ku to come back. The seemingly fallen Jojo Cavern world was really a swamp with a hidden giant crocodile. But what about Qin Kuo? As a law enforcer, if he died in the process of law enforcement, we can't escape the blame. Moreover, he is from the Qin family, Meng Ku said. The middle-aged man in linen sighed deeply. What else can we do? I have asked the Sunluo law enforcer who is closest to this place. They will deal with this matter. Let's just wait and see. Hearing the name of the Sunluo law enforcer, Meng Ku's facial muscles twitched. There were many types of law enforcers in the Alliance. Most of them were like them. Their main task was to eliminate the demons that had infiltrated the Alliance. Usually, a strong law enforcer would lead 2 or 3 weaker law enforcers to carry out their task. However, there were also a small number of law enforcers who had special identities and were engaged in other special tasks. For example, the Sunluo law enforcers were emissaries who were superior to ordinary law enforcers. Their task was to deal with unexpected incidents. They had the right to take over the tasks of any law enforcement team and punish the members of the law enforcement team who violated the rules. The ordinary law enforcers kept quiet out of fear when faced with this law enforcement team. That's fine. Let them handle it, Meng Ku said. Inadvertently, he noticed that the middle-aged man in linen was sweating nervously on his forehead. Su Yu, who was training silently, resurrected 5 people on the first day. This was the limit of the divine palm of life. They were Gang Dalai, an Euro and her disciple, Zi Donglai and his daughter. On the second day, it was the Phoenix Cabinet's master, Long Jueshin, Lin Yunhe, Qiu Ningshui and Elder Liao. Su Yu resurrected a group of people every day. On the 6th day, he resurrected 30 people, all of whom were his old friends. Su Yu felt most gratified during these 6 days. If he had the ability to resurrect the dead earlier, his teacher, Li Guang, could be resurrected too? Su Yu observed Gang Dalai carefully. Except for his golden bones, he didn't find anything special about him. Su Yu was quite confused. After they were resurrected, Su Yu sent them to Zhenlong City, which caused a great shock. How did a dead king come back to life? Although they were shocked, they understood the special power of a peak mortal fairy. After all, at their level, the peak mortal fairy was beyond their reach, which was quite mysterious. Su Yu felt relieved. Then, he was in the mood to check his status. After 6 days, Su Yu's cultivation had regressed to the stage 1 all creations realm. He had maintained this level for a whole day, which was quite strange. Heh, little brat, congratulations! You have passed the 3/9 ordeal and reached the almighty level. The voice of the evil god appeared in Su Yu's mind. Su Yu was surprised. The 3/9 ordeal is over? Impossible. The love ordeal is in 3 days. How could it be over in advance? I guess it's because of the girl who loves you. Since the ordeal is on her, the ordeal is gone after she left, the evil god said as he smacked his lips. Su Yu asked thoughtfully, will the ordeal disappear by itself? The evil god shook his head. Of course it won't disappear. I just said it is not on you. I didn't say it will disappear. Su Yu was shocked. Do you mean the ordeal is transferred to Xiaojingyu? Chapter 11:25. Su Yu calmed himself down. There was nothing wrong with Xiaojingyu's life jade pendant, which meant that even though she had endured the tribulation of love, her life wasn't in danger. However, if Su Yu did not see Xiaojingyu with his own eyes, he would not be at ease. Jingyu, where are you? Su Yu muttered. Ahem. The evil god said in an untimely manner, well, boy, I am very grateful for the souls you sent me. There are even 4 mortal fairy souls. Previously, Su Yu had promised to give him the soul of a mortal fairy if he helped him achieve the body of 9 dragons. He gave away 4 of them in one go. Normally, I should be thanking you, but among the 4 mortal fairies that you've sent, there's one that even I don't dare to eat easily. The evil god said awkwardly. Su Yu was startled. Who? The law enforcement officer you captured. The tone of the evil god was solemn. How did you capture the law enforcement officer of the Great Eastern Alliance? Don't you know you're in big trouble? Su Yu was surprised. In his opinion, the so-called law enforcers were merely people who maintained order in the Alliance. If they died, so be it. Why would it be a pity? Judging by the man's words and actions, Su Yu was afraid that if he did not die, a great catastrophe would befall him. Looking at Su Yu's expression, the evil god knew what Su Yu was thinking. He sighed and said, Hey boy, come in. Since you are going to leave the JoJo world, someone must tell you some things that you should know. Otherwise, you will be in big trouble without knowing it. Su Yu obeyed and entered the soul dimension. He was shocked by what he saw. The evil god was so weak that he was only left with a single drop of blood. He suddenly remembered that 7 days ago, in order to help him refine the cultivation god's bloodline faster, the evil god had instilled his own divine power into him. Could it be that it was that ball of divine energy that caused the heretic god to weaken to such an extent? Su Yu sighed with emotion as he stared at the drop of blood. Haha, if you want to thank me, say it out loud. The evil god laughed. Su Yu's grateful look made the evil god a little uncomfortable. Don't worry, the 3 mortal fairy souls you gave me are enough for me to surpass my previous state. Speaking of which, I've made a profit. That being said, how could the evil god be sure that Su Yu would win in the end? How could he be sure that Su Yu would give him the mortal fairy's soul if he won? Unknowingly, the 2 of them had turned from enemies to friends. Alright, tell me. Su Yu's thoughts shifted, and he immediately knew the condition of the 4 mortal fairies' souls. The souls of the mortal fairies of the 3 prefectures' kings had been devoured, so they looked very weak. Only the law enforcer's soul was completely intact, which showed that the evil god was afraid of him. Su Yu suddenly realized that he might have underestimated the law enforcers when even he was afraid of them. Can you let him go? Evil god asked right away. Su Yu thought for a while, then slowly shook his head. No. Letting it go will bring endless harm. Alright, I hope you're mentally prepared. The evil god said solemnly, The Great Eastern Alliance is an alliance of deities, spanning a quarter of the Milky Way. There are as many as 100 deities in it. 100 gods? Suyu took in a breath of cold air. Therefore, the Great Eastern Alliance is also known as the Alliance of 100 Deities. The 100 deities advance and retreat together, and the various cavern worlds are connected as one, forming an incomparably vast god realm, said the evil god. Suyu thought for a while and said, "So, was the Jojo cavern world of God Kailan once considered the Great Eastern Alliance?" The evil god smiled. "Yes, but after his death, his name was removed, and the Jojo cavern world was forcibly expelled from the Great Eastern Alliance. Since then, it has become an isolated cavern world, drifting in the Milky Way. The 100 deities are in isolation all year round or travel outside. Usually, they don't care about the alliance. The 100 deities each elect the strongest in their own cavern world to form 100 law enforcement teams. Each team represents a deity, and they enforce the law in the vast alliance cavern world." Suyu finally understood what the evil god meant. "You mean, the law enforcers are not terrible, but the deities behind the law enforcers?" Suyu asked. The evil god nodded seriously. "Exactly. The status of the law enforcers is transcendent, and their words and deeds represent their respective deities. Even other deities have no right to punish the law enforcers, unless the law enforcers violate the law jointly made by the 100 deities, and everyone has the right to punish them. Once a law enforcer is accidentally killed, a special team of law enforcers will come to punish him. This team is called the Sunluo Law Enforcers, which is made up of the descendants of 100 deities. Each of them is a descendant of a deity with the bloodline of a deity, and their cultivation is above the mortal fairy realm. Many of them are at the 3rd stage of the mortal fairy, and some are at the peak of the 4th stage. It's even said that the captain of each generation is a prospective deity. Except for the deities, the Sunluo Law Enforcers are the most powerful law enforcers in the Great Eastern Alliance. They supervise all the law enforcers, and they have the power to decide the life and death of the law enforcers." Hearing that, Suyu couldn't help but click his tongue. The law enforcers made up of the descendants of 100 deities were equal to the imperial guards of 100 deities. When a law enforcer goes missing, a small team of Sunluo law enforcers will come to investigate. They are all descendants of deities, and each of them has the special ability inherited from their bloodlines. If you are found out you killed a law enforcer, you will face a terrible end, which is even more dangerous than being hunted by the Central Prefecture's king. Suyu became serious. He didn't expect he would attract such a horrible force. "So, do you still want to kill him?" the evil god asked seriously. Suyu was lost in thought. After a while, he asked, "Now I have kidnapped him, right? If I let him go, how will the Sunluo law enforcers deal with me?" After a long silence, the evil god said in a low voice, "If you imprison a law enforcer of the Alliance without authorization, you will be enslaved for 100 years, and will be released with good behavior." 100 years of enslavement? What's the difference between that and death? As long as the law enforcement officers who had been imprisoned used a little bit of their strength to take revenge on the enslaved, it would be as easy as killing an ant. Judging from the law enforcer who was captured, he was not a broad-minded person. He would die if he was found out, or he would die if he turned himself in. Was there a need to choose? Eat him first, and don't leave any trace. Suyu's eyes became colder and more vicious. The evil god sighed. "I knew you would choose this path. Well, don't worry, I will clean it up, but you have to be mentally prepared. The descendants of the deities all have special abilities that are unknown to others, and they may find out what you did." When he returned to the outside world, Suyu's mood became much heavier. The Sunluo Law Enforcers. Swish. At this moment, the god Kailan walked over. "Hey, your cultivation is stable, and you directly broke through to the all-creations realm?" The god Kylin walked around Su Yu and said in amazement, "Really? In my cavern world, you are not the first to pass the fake 39 ordeals, but you have benefited so much that you directly skipped the almighty level and reached the all-creations realm. This is also the first time I have seen such a great benefit." Su Yu smiled. Just now, he had the time to look inside his body. The vital energy in his body had all been transformed into the all-creations mighty force, which was stored in a small figure in his abdomen. The small figure looked very similar to Su Yu. It was vivid and lifelike, sitting steadily on his abdomen like an old monk in meditation. This was the primordial spirit of the all-creations old monster. The incomparably huge Dantian from before was replaced by this extremely clear primordial spirit. However, upon closer inspection, Su Yu discovered that there were actually 8 holes on the surface of his primordial spirit. He couldn't help but worry that his primordial spirit had some problems due to the rapid progress of his cultivation. What? 8 orifices primordial soul? The sacred Kylin, who was sizing up Su Yu, seemed to have discovered something. Then, he was shocked. 8 orifices primordial spirit? Su Yu relaxed slightly, as it didn't seem like something bad had happened. You, brat, are you really the reincarnation of a monster? Tell me, how big was your Dantian when you were in the fairy realm? Sacred Kylin was amazed. Su Yu mulled it over for a moment, then said, "If I calculate it according to the average level 9 fairy standard, then I'm about 80 times larger than them." 80 times? The sacred Kylin clicked his tongue. No wonder he has cultivated the primordial spirit of 8 apertures. My goodness, a primordial spirit with multiple orifices that can only be born in the top 10 cavern worlds is actually born in my cavern world. Are there differences between primordial spirits? Su Yu asked. The sacred Kylin rolled his eyes. What do you think? 1 more aperture is equivalent to 1 more channel to absorb the spiritual energy of the world and transform it into the all-creation mighty force, which can double the speed of cultivation. Ordinary all-creation old monsters usually have 1 aperture, and it's not easy for them to have 2 apertures. 3 apertures are considered to be extremely talented, and 4 apertures are considered to be top-notch heaven rulers. As for 5 apertures, only the destined Emperor Zhan Wushuang can achieve that in my cavern world. Su Yu said, "Is Zhan Wushuang a person derived from your celestial energy sphere? How could he be so powerful?" The sacred Kylin stared at Su Yu. "You are a person born in a small world that I created randomly. You have 8 apertures, and you still doubt the origin of someone who has 5 apertures?" He looked angry as if Su Yu was trying to catch a thief. "However, this is just my speculation. When he breaks through the all-creation realm, it's unknown how many apertures he will have." He hasn't broken through the all-creation realm? Su Yu vaguely remembered that Zhan Wushuang had been suppressing his cultivation. Could it be that he wanted to expand the Almighty's fetal crystal and achieve the primordial spirit with multiple apertures like Su Yu? Speaking of which, Su Yu remembered another person who was also suppressing the cultivation of the Almighty. In another half a day, the all-access ship will arrive outside the Jojo Cavern world. Get ready. When the time comes, I will immediately move the whole continent. Then, you can board the ship and leave immediately. We have to complete the arrangement as soon as possible. Su Yu nodded. Then, he gathered the Ghost Clan, the Great Oriental Family, and the Severed Fairy Cliff. Then, he ordered them to enter the 9 Jade Spiritual Pearl in an orderly manner. The sacred Kylin was also waiting patiently. He had opened up the separated worlds in the 100-story Martial Tower and connected them into a cavern world that was far larger than Jojo. He was just waiting to move the Jojo continent into it. They were all busy. In the land of the far west, in the depths of a haze. Chapter 11:26. There were 2 other people on the boat. One was Han Xian, who looked very sad, and the other was Gu Taishu. Senior brother, how did Master die? Who killed him? Han Xian asked. After she was captured by Qin Xian'er and her cultivation deity bloodline was taken away, Zhan Wushuang suddenly appeared and saved her. Gu Taishu asked in surprise, Brother Zhan, did those two extraterrestrial experts kill him? He recalled the day when the sword from beyond the sky destroyed the central prefecture city. If Zhan Wushuang hadn't sensed it in advance and taken Gu Taishu away, he would have been killed there. Zhan Wushuang stood at the bow of the boat with his hands clasped behind his back. He snorted coldly, Death is death. The winner takes all. Master was not as good as the winner. What's there to take revenge for? They had been hiding in the far west all this time and didn't know anything about the outside world. Zhan Wushuang knew who killed the central prefecture's king, but he didn't want to take revenge. In his opinion, the central prefecture's king had lost, so his death was not a pity. Let's go now. This boat floated here from the Star River when I was 10 years old when I traveled to the far west. I've been hiding it until today. As the close friends of the central prefecture's king, we can't stay in Jiuzhou anymore. If we don't leave now, we may not be able to. Zhan Wushuang said. Han Xian grasped the side of the boat tightly and said nothing. In fact, she wasn't as sad as she thought, especially when Qin Xian'er forced her to complete the Jade Maiden Heavenly Frost art. When she knew the central prefecture's king's intention, she became much more clear-headed. He was sad because another person he was familiar with had died. Han Xian didn't care about Jiuzhou anymore. Gu Taishu clenched his teeth and said angrily, What a pity! I finally perfected the body of 9 spirits and haven't fought with Su Yu yet. It's a pity to let him go like this. Zhan Wushuang glanced at him and shook his head calmly. You'd better not fight with him. What? Gu Taishu looked at Zhan Wushuang strangely. Was he not strong enough to defeat Su Yu after reaching the level of all creations? Since you have no objection, let's go now. Gu Taishu started the boat and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a huge fog surged out from the depths of the far west, forcing the desolate beasts to avoid it. Zhan Wushuang's eyes narrowed. He saw a mountain-like ship break through the clouds, crushing countless desolate beasts along the way until it arrived in front of them. At the bow of the huge ship stood a woman wearing a green feather cloak. The woman's expression was cold and indifferent. Although she was beautiful, she had a haughty air that kept people at a distance. Behind the woman stood a few young men in uniform, standing behind her in an extremely respectful manner. And the cultivation of each of those young men was comparable to the prefecture kings of the 9 prefectures. As for the woman in the lead, if Zhan Wushuang had not seen her with his own eyes, he would not have been sure if she was on the ship. Jiuzhou Cavern World, listen up. The Sunluo Law Enforcement Team is here to investigate the disappearance of the Alliance law enforcers. Before the conclusion is reached, no creature is allowed to leave the cavern world. Half a day was almost up. The sacred Kylin was very nervous. Finally, the migration had begun. In the Jiuzhou continent, except for the desolate West continent, the other 4 continents slowly rose from the depths of the ground. To Su Yu's surprise, the central continent's pillar was not shot at the central prefecture, but at the outer sanctum of the Red Blood Palace. And this pillar was no stranger to Su Yu. It was the carp leaping over the Dragon Gate stone pillar at the entrance of the outer sanctum. Su Yu could not help but be surprised. No wonder the outer sanctum attached great importance to that stone pillar. Even when the ghost army arrived and Mo Tianxian destroyed the outer sanctum, the stone pillar was not touched. So that was it. The 4 pillars were shaped like a dragon's claw, grabbing the entire Jiuzhou continent. In an instant, the space around the Jiuzhou continent collapsed, and the whole world fell into collapse. In the depths of the sky, a dark entrance was exposed at the base of a huge tower. The entire Jiuzhou continent was grabbed by the carp leaping over and gradually disappeared into the dark base of the tower. The creatures on the Jojo continent did not notice the drastic changes of the continent at all. They were just surprised that the day suddenly turned into night. It was not until the entire Jojo continent disappeared into the world of the martial arts tower that they saw the light again. Was it a solar eclipse just now? It's so strange. Why did the sky suddenly turn dark? Many people were talking about it. Only the creatures on the edge of the continent were shocked. Where did the sea disappear? How did it become a continent in front of us? Ah, look. What kind of species is that? Why haven't I seen it before? The Jojo continent was completely moved into the world of the martial arts tower. And Su Yu finally settled the 4 forces in the 9 Jade spiritual pearl. However, Su Yu was slightly surprised that Emo Tianxian was also rejected by the world of the martial arts tower. What are you looking at? Emo Tianxian raised her snow-white chin and provoked. Su Yu shrugged. If you want to leave Jojo, it seems that you have to enter my 9 Jade spiritual pearl. Is it really okay to be so arrogant? He was used to fighting with Emo Tianxian, and Emo Tianxian was used to opposing Su Yu. The two of them stared at each other, and neither of them was willing to admit defeat. Ahem, you two, even if you want to flirt, you should look at the time. The ship is about to leave. What are you still doing here? The sacred Kylan was holding a small tower in his mouth. It was the world of the martial arts tower that contained the entire Jojo continent. Who's flirting? Emo Tianxian showed her silver teeth. The sacred Kylan shivered and said embarrassedly, Anyway, stop fooling around. Whether we can leave smoothly or not depends on this moment. Let's go to the far west first. Su Yu nodded and flew to the far west with the sacred Kylan and Emo Tianxian. In the entire Jojo continent, only the forbidden areas occupied by the Star River and the wild beasts existed. The rest of the places were just a pitch-black void. From today on, the Jojo cavern world would be an empty shell. As soon as they landed in the far west, Su Yu frowned. It doesn't seem right. When I came here last time, this place was full of wild beasts. Why is there no sign of life now? Su Yu had the heart of eternity, so his perception of life couldn't be calculated by common sense. Emo Tianxian, who was a stage 3 mortal fairy, couldn't sense the abnormality, but Su Yu could easily detect it. The sacred Kylan frowned deeply. Something is wrong indeed. The far west is different from the past. Even the Jojo deity said so. Emo Tianxian became cautious. She squinted her eyes and looked around. Suddenly, she shouted softly, Who is in front of us? Come out. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound of trees being pushed could be heard. Looking over, in the fog, a huge ship slowly floated over. On the side of the ship, a small black boat was hanging. On the boat, a young woman in a feather cloak was standing. Behind her were several young mortal fairies with strong auras. At the stern of the ship, 3 people were standing. To be exact, they were Zhan Wushuang and the other 2 who were under house arrest. As the giant ship approached, Su Yu and the others were under great pressure. We've been waiting for you for a while. The woman in the feather cloak stood at the bow of the ship and looked at Su Yu and the others calmly. When she glanced at the sacred Kylan, she said, I was wondering who moved the whole continent. It turns out you are the Jojo deity. I am He Xianran, the descendant of the crane deity. Greetings, sacred Kylan. She called the sacred Kylan senior, but she just stood there with her hands clasped behind her back. The few young men behind the woman revealed mocking smiles. Miss Xianran, aren't you afraid of scaring this sacred Kylan by calling yourself a junior? Ha ha ha. I'm afraid he is very happy. He has been dead for 10,000 years. Someone still knows him. It's no wonder he is happy. He Xianran waved her hand to ask them to be quiet with a faint smile on her face. Looking at the sacred Kylan, who was getting more and more embarrassed, she said calmly, Sacred Kylan, I am the 80th member of the Sunluo Law Enforcing Team. Today, I am here to investigate the disappearance of Qin Kuo, a member of the demon-killing law enforcing team. I hope you can cooperate with me. As a deity who had lived for countless years, the sacred Kylan was quite shrewd. She stopped being unhappy and said coldly, Chinqua, a member of the law enforcing team? Well, I have sensed 2 auras from outside. As for the missing one, I didn't know who took him away. He Xianran's eyes were as black as ink. She said sharply, Sacred Kylan, do you think I waited patiently for you to move the whole continent without any purpose? Do you want to take away the world of the martial arts tower? The sacred Kylan's face changed slightly. He Xianran said with a smile, You are wrong. Since all the creatures have been taken into the world of the martial arts tower, the suspects must be among them. We just want to take away the martial arts tower and interrogate the creatures in it. We don't want to take it away. We will return it to you later. Once the martial arts tower was taken away by the Sunluo law enforcing team, the sacred Kylan wouldn't be able to get it back in the future. Who would care about a deity who had been dead for 10,000 years? Perhaps, this Crane Xianran wanted to take advantage of this to openly occupy the 9 regions as her own. The central prefecture's king was driven away, and now he Xianran came. And the identity of the latter was even more troublesome. You can investigate, but you can't suspect all the creatures, right? Just tell me who you suspect, and I will hand over the creatures in it to you. The sacred Kylan insisted on not handing over the world of the martial arts tower. To the sacred Kylan's surprise, he Xianran nodded and said, As a junior, I should respect the sacred Kylan. Otherwise, my father will punish me for being rude to the deities of the former alliance. I think there are 3 possible suspects, he Xianran said with a smile. The sacred Kylan's eyes lit up. Which 3? He Xianran said calmly, The 3 of you, sacred Kylan, and the 2 human cultivators beside you. Hearing that, the sacred Kylan was furious. This is going too far. After capturing the 3 of them, the martial pagoda world would still fall into their hands.